We'll call to order the Board of Zoning Appeals. Would you please stand for the pledge to the flag? Keith, would you lead us? Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Keith Bratcher,
Here.
Joe Crowell,
Here.
Jerry Sartain,
Present.
Joe Machoto,
Here.
Michael Rather,
Here.
Jared Barrett,
Here.
Zane Cantrell.
Present.
We do have a quorum, and all voting members are present, sir.
Okay, thank you. You have the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to be approved
Have
as
a motion to
presented.
be approved. Do we have a second? Have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. They are approved. We have a couple of items that I'd like to call your attention to if you're here for those. The Craig Hay cell tower on Osborne Lane has been deferred, will not come up tonight. The Aaron Frampton cell tower on Baker Road has been withdrawn. So we have those two items that will not be on the agenda tonight. The first item of business will be taken up for the ICM cemetery. As most of you realized, we had a couple of requests from BZA members which were approved. One was to take a look at the turn lanes on Ville Road and at the ICM Center. The other one is to take a look at the soil there. And I think we have most of that information for you and will be presented tonight. I also would like to remind everyone that we're still under a 3-minute speaking time for those of you who come before the BZA. We're not going to be here all night. We'll have a limited time that we'll be able to make whatever final presentation that we need to make. But most all of this information has already come to the BZA, and there's no point in us going on and on about it. But we do not want anyone to be left out, so we'll get to that a little later on. I'm going to let the staff give us a rundown to where we are at this point.
Thank you, Chairman Cantrell. Application 2013-57 is a request for special exception approval for the establishment of a cemetery, a minimal impact community facility activity upon a property located in the residential medium zone. The property is located at 2605 Villes Road, and this item was presented to the board just as Chairman Cantrell stated. The staff has not changed its staff report. It relies on its staff report and presentation from last month. And the applicant was asked by the board to provide additional information regarding traffic impacts related to the cemetery, as well as information regarding the soils on the site. And the applicant has submitted a response, and I believe that they will be going through it. Oh, sorry.
Is that on?
Yes. Okay. The applicant will present their response to the request by the board. We've not received any additional phone calls this month, and the sign, we did verify that the sign remained up on the site, and the photos were as presented before of the surrounding area and the site itself. And the map that was originally presented, we've included that into the record, and a general site plan. That concludes our presentation.
Do we have anyone here from the ICM that would come forward now? Please identify yourself and make your comments.
John Green. I am an attorney here in Murfreesboro, Chairman, Commissioners, Council. This, as the board knows, was deferred from the last hearing for the address of 2 points. That is, the suggestion that funeral and burial services at the Islamic Center would create unforeseen traffic problems, and that burial might have an adverse impact on the site soil and surrounding groundwater. Delivered to the board today have been a letter with further explanation and substantiation as to why funeral and burial services at the Islamic Center would not create any other traffic problems, as well as a traffic study done in 2010, which shows the volume of traffic, or in fact the lack thereof, generally in that area. In addition, tendered with this letter to the board was a report of geotechnic exploration, which the board already had in its possession, which was done prior to construction of the Islamic Center, which shows in pertinent part that the subsurface water was not observed in any of the 8 site borings that were done, which were done down to bedrock, and that the average bedrock depth at the site is approximately 15 1/4 feet. Now, this depth is well above the 6-foot depth generally used for burials, although, as an aside, there's no legal requirement that a burial be at 6 feet. With respect to the traffic concerns, which in fact are unsubstantiated, let me please remind the board that, contrary to memorial and funeral services at other institutions and denominations around town, in the county, frankly, all of the services that are contemplated here, as well as the burial, would be at one site. In other occurrences, often the funeral or the memorial service is held at one place, and the body is transported to a cemetery across town, sometimes across the county, thus necessitating this procession, which requires the intervention of local law enforcement and traffic to be stopped and halted, sometimes for extended periods of time, at often major intersections. These complications would not occur if burial were permitted at the Islamic Center, because all of the services and the burial would be at that one location. Now, as is true with most other denominations, the largest part of any congregational attendance at the location is not for funeral services, but is for worship services. In addition, and the worship services, may I remind the board, have been occurring there since the center opened quite some several months ago. Friday prayers generally are the services that attract the most attendance. There have not been any traffic complaints as a result of those services being held. Now, the Department of Vital Statistics suggests that in Rutherford County, there's an average of 6 deaths per 1,000. This is 2010 statistics, I believe, which are the last available. Presuming there were 1,000 members of the Islamic congregation, which there are not, it's reasonable to suggest that there would be approximately 6 deaths in that congregation per year, which is not, frankly, reasonable, because the median age of that congregation is substantially less than elderly. So you would be talking about funeral and burial services only approximately every 2 months. The traffic study that has been submitted was already, I believe, in possession of the board. It shows in a number of categories that the volume of traffic at the intersections of Veal Road and Bradeville Pike are so minimal that the traffic study could not even be completed. There are minimum required numbers of cars passing at an intersection in order for a study to be completed. there weren't even sufficient numbers of cars passing this intersection for the study to be completed. Since the opening of the Islamic Center, as far as I am aware, and I'm confident the board would have apprised me of such, there have been no traffic complaints regarding any of the services at the Islamic Center. Questions have been raised. Let me also express this. With respect to funeral and burial services at the Islamic Center, as is true with every other funeral, rarely does every member of a congregation attend a funeral service, much less every acquaintance of the decedent. As is true with other denominations and other faiths, oftentimes condolences to a family are extended prior to the services. This is true in Islam as well, which allows condolences to be expressed for 3 days preceding the burial. So to presume that the whole congregation and all of the friends of a decedent would descend upon the Islamic Center at one time for a funeral is an incorrect assumption and skews any consideration of whether there would be an adverse traffic impact upon that location if funeral and burial services were located there. Now, if the board decides to deny the application for a cemetery, which, may I remind the board, has already been recommended for approval by the staff, memorial services, funeral services would continue to be held at the Islamic Center. Now, why would that be a problem? Because you would then entertain the same problem you have vis-a-vis traffic when all of the members of that funeral party then accompanied the body across town or across county lines to a cemetery away from the Islamic Center for purposes of burial. So in fact, traffic impact is minimized if funeral and burial services are permitted at the Islamic Center with the approval of the cemetery. Questions have been raised, to move on, about the effects, if any, upon surrounding properties and groundwater as a consequence of burial at the Islamic Center. The staff report states in pertinent part, and I will quote it because it is important, the proposed use, that is a cemetery, should not result in undue adverse effects upon adjacent properties related to the public health, safety, and general welfare. That's from page 3 of the board's staff report. This conclusion was reached by the examination of all relevant environmental and legal factors affecting the proposed site, including the proximity and source of water used by occupants of adjacent properties. Please be advised, or reminded as the case may be, that as the staff report points out, water will be provided to the site by the Consolidated Utility District of Rutherford County. Further, as the staff report points out, since there are no known wells located upon the subject property or within a 25-foot buffer zone encompassing the area designated for the proposed cemetery, it appears that the proposed use will not impact the public or private provision of water to the subject property or surrounding properties. Quite simply, it's impossible to contaminate a well that doesn't exist. I'll say this and then I'll end, and I'm grateful for your patience. This is obviously an important subject. Concerns have been expressed about the preparation of the decedent in the absence of embalming chemicals and the lack of use of crypts and caskets in an Islamic burial. That is true, but Islam is far from idiosyncratic or unique in this practice, as it has been by far the norm among all cultures and theologies for centuries. As is widely recognized, it is in fact the embalming chemicals and materials used to construct caskets that are themselves, on the occasion of the failure of an integrity of a grave, the polluting substances. Now, that failure of an integrity of a grave is usually due to a catastrophic a meteorological event, like a flood or a hurricane, which we don't have, an earthquake, which we very, very, very rarely have. But the truth is that should such a catastrophe occur here, the effect would be the same on every of the other 477 cemeteries already existing in the county, the majority of which have burials which do not use caskets nor crypts. They are private cemeteries, as exactly the applicant requests approval for today. So based on the foregoing, and hopefully in response to the board's previous inquiries, and with the recommendation of the staff for approval of this application, I respectfully request that after deferment and upon further motion, you approve the application's special exception request.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Now,
I will remain available for questions.
okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, hold up just a minute, Mr. Green. Joe?
Yes, sir. Where did you get your information about private cemeteries not burying in vaults, or did I misunderstand you?
No, sir, you did not misunderstand me. Historically, of the vast majority of cemeteries in Rutherford County, they're on private property, and they are very old. I think staff could perhaps address that. And it's very common practice that in, for example, farm cemeteries, private residential cemeteries, there are not such used.
Well, I'm going to beg to differ with you with that because I've done a lot of research, and I've talked to several funeral homes in this county, and they have buried on private property, and most of them, in their effect, use vaults and caskets, okay?
That may well be, and it is, quite frankly, sir, not germane to the question before the board, which is whether that sort of burial has any adverse effect on site soil or immediately adjacent groundwater or surrounding groundwater. The board has information before it tonight to show that that is not the case.
Thank you. Any other questions? Michael, go ahead.
Green, the boring sites are labeled B1 through B8. Do you know which boring site was done on the actual cemetery location? Because I'm not seeing it on this map. The reason I'm asking is because there were auger refusals on a couple sites. The auger only went down 3 feet, went down 8 feet. And I don't see on my map where there was a boring site at this cemetery location.
Is that the end of your question, sir?
Is that the end to my
Yes, sir.
question? Yes.
Yes, sir, that's correct. As you will see, and the board has had in its possession prior to tonight's hearing, this Geo Services report of geotechnical exploration. You're correct in stating that there were, of the eight auger bores done, one at B4 with a depth of 3.1. The next least deep was B7 at 8.7. Now, the cemetery proposed site is in the northeast corner of this property. The majority of these boreholes were done under the actual site for construction. The B4 site, about which you expressed concern, I believe is underneath what is presently the facility. As far as I know, there was not a borehole done specifically in the area of the proposed cemetery, but let me remind you, please, sir, that the cemetery is at a higher elevation, comparatively speaking, to the rest of the property. It is not in a depressed or shallower area. So it's reasonable to presume, based on this information, that the average depth of bedrock would be consistent with what has been found throughout the rest of the site, and that's approximately 15 feet, a little better.
Based on a presumption.
A reasonable presumption, sir, based upon the geological examination that you have before you. Yes, sir.
The highest elevation of my property has the most rock on it. I can dig the least there. Also, in this report, it showed that this property has a tendency to have sinkholes created on it, which is basically all over Rutherford County. Is there any? I didn't see in the report if that involves the whole property, that there's a chance for sinkholes to develop. Or if there's something that you have that may identify, here's areas where it may be more prone for sinkholes as opposed to this area over here.
You have the report in front of you. I would suggest to you, sir, that if the threat or likelihood of a sinkhole was a possibility, much less a probability, in this site, the report would have addressed it. I've read the report, as have you, and it does not address that. And I believe, as you yourself have pointed out, the whole of the county is subject to sinkholes. If I had any information that suggested this specific parcel of property was any more prone to sinkholes than any other, I would have provided that to you. I am unaware of any suggestion whatsoever from any source that that might be the case.
Well, I don't know about anybody else on the board, but I saw this for the first time about 45 minutes ago.
May I ask, Chairman, you had stated in the meeting preceding the public meeting that this information, the Geoservices report, was already in the board's file.
I think you all already have that. Is that not correct?
It was in staff's file, yes.
If I may then, sir, already being part of staff's file, the information in this report would have been taken into account, and staff can be addressed in its preparation of the report. The staff report, may I please remind you, recommends approval.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out one thing that kind of goes along with what he said. I think last month I made the this was part of my recommendation about doing the soil, checking on the soils. But as far as this study, I know it was done in 2010. Now, it might have been in our staff's files, but it was not in any board members' files. I'm like him. First time I've seen this before our board meeting started tonight in our pre-meeting, so I had no pertinent information or looked at this. If I'd already known about this, that probably would have answered some of my questions before our meeting last month. So I'm just saying this might have been in our staff's position, but it was not in mine. I don't think any other board members before our pre-meeting tonight. So,
And if I may address that again, please, sir. It would be my presumption, and I encourage you to please ask members of the staff, that since this report was in their possession prior to the preparation of staff's report, which recommends approval of this application, staff would have taken into consideration all of the information in this report. And if any negative information had been contained in this report or suggested by this report, staff would have made the board aware of it.
Joe, you had a question.
Yeah, you made a statement a minute ago about the cemetery being the high part of the ground. I was out there today, and off to the right of the cemetery, a proposed location of the cemetery that I assumed was the location, there is a real low dip. And I also printed off the internet topographical impressions of that area out there. And there's about a 10-foot dip, which is on the property. There's no way for that water to get out of there. 10 foot from the highest point of where the cemetery is going to be. So water from that area is going to drain there, and it's going to stand there. I'll question the staff later about whether that was a sinkhole or not. I've got a lot of pictures that I printed off the internet about tree lines and stuff that was that were in there. But I still have a lot of questions for staff.
If I might, please, sir. Staff would have been well aware of the topography of the site at the time it prepared its report and recommended approval. Let me please remind you that, as was discussed thoroughly at the prior hearing on this application, any burial on the site has to be in complete compliance with all local, state, and federal laws. There are no special exceptions for particular burials that would be afforded this denomination. It is a private cemetery, any burial into which has to comply with all pertinent regulations.
Joe?
I got one thing to say. I've been on this board 6 years, and we've had one graveyard come before us, and we denied the request for that graveyard. So whatever happens here tonight, I don't know which way it's going to go. But we asked you last month to have soil samples to where you would be proper to bury people on this land, and evidently we didn't get those. Am I right, Eric?
We we have the geotechnical report that's before you, and it shows the boring.
All we got here is what they had when they built the building.
That's true.
We didn't get anything we requested, in other words.
The only geotechnical report we have is the report
We
that was done.
requested that we get those reports last month, based on the cemetery. Does anybody have that report?
If you're asking me if new soil samples were conducted within the last 2 weeks in response to that request, the answer is no, sir.
Let's, some of these questions we'll talk to our staff about. Anything concerning the ICM proposal that he's made, let's limit those questions to that, and then we'll get into trying to answer some of your. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for the ICM?
No, I don't have any right now, Mr. Chairman, but later on, if some other things come out, if we want to bring Mr. Green or anybody back, we can.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
thank
can.
you.
Is this the only person from the ICM's going to be here tonight?
No,
to
sir.
speak?
Dr. Fathy, Dr. Esam Fathy, who made the presentation of the application at the board's last hearing, is present.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Green.
Mr. Chairman.
At this point in time, I'm going to open this to a public hearing listen to me, for those of you who have not had a chance to say anything. Now, we heard from a lot of people last time. There may be a few of you here that really needed to say something to the BZA before we make a decision. If that is so, and you didn't get a chance last month, some of you have already, we know your views. If you didn't get a chance last month, please come to the table here to my right, write your name down, then come on up and give us your information. We'd like to hear from those of you who have not had a chance to speak to the BZA.
Mr. Chairman, before they get up and speak, I want to kind of make a little bit of statement and kind of remind our staff, I guess our board members, every year, we have to, we have a, I guess a continuing education thing that we do, and we have to be apprised of what's any new laws or anything pertaining to Board of Zoning. And, we just done that back last month, and I read up on a lot of that. We had someone that come and presented a class to us, but the main thing was focused on us was practices, and conditional uses, and that's this right here being one of them. I think one thing that was pointed out for us was things that we always had to look out for when we do conditional use applications, and one of them says that however, negative impacts can reduce the quality of life in neighborhoods and community. Decision makers, which that's what we are, this Board of Zoning, should always consider whether the use could generate any of the following impacts. And I think I brought this up last month, but I've got something in writing. It says traffic impacts. So sometimes I'm hearing whether or not we can even consider those things when we're looking at this application. I think we got to look at it for every application. What impacts it could have if we approve something. This one says traffic impacts, which suggest congestion, safety, loss reduction, noise, glare of vehicles. The other one is visual impacts, environmental impacts, which include air, water pollution, loss of reduction of habitat, loss of reduction of natural resources, sensitive areas, and wetlands. So it also includes nuisance impacts, privacy impacts, and safety and welfare impacts. So I just want to put that out there. This is what we were classed on. This is what we were educated on. things that we need to be doing, and I think that's what we're doing. It's just somehow it seems suggested that, you know, our staff recommends something, and I'm not down in our staff. I think they do a fine job. I'm just saying staff recommends, but I understand that, but I think we have things that we have to look at too, and we're one having to make this decision. So I don't think it's been put to us just because the staff says that we should do it. I'm at this board. I think I'm appointed to this board to look at all the facts and make the decision based on my conscience, not what the staff's conscience. So I just want to put that out there. And
Okay, thank you. And we might want to bring that up at a little later time. We'll hear from our first citizen. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Okay. I'm Darrell Whaley. I live at 4974 West Trimble Road in Milton, Tennessee. I've been a pastor. The Lord called me to preach in 1964. Eagleville Baptist Church ordained me. I've been doing funerals in this county all those years. I do several of them. If you don't believe it, just look in the Daily News Journal. It'll verify that. And all in the country at Evergreen, Roselawn, the church, some of the churches have cemeteries, and I've never buried a person, never, that wasn't in a casket with a vault over it. And I don't know where Mr. Green got his information about this, but I've been doing it for all those years, and it's never happened. So we need to understand that, and there's a lot of revised history going around about our founding fathers, about our country, and some of these revised reports, you know, and I don't understand why the ICM can't go ahead and do the things that's been asked for them to do about the soil and things like this. And most of the times the way they answer that question is, we don't want to, just as if they don't have to. But it needs to be done, and I would appreciate it if you would see that it's done in the proper way, and proper studies, proper information given, updated stuff, and I'll ask the ICM to please, and the leadership there to please supply us with this, because we don't have any problem as a pastor, and I don't have any problem with y'all being here at all, but just be heads up with us and just do what we ask you to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name's Tim Nixon, and I own the land right adjacent to this piece of property, the 15 acres that touches it. So all I'm asking is that we have, if you do approve it, that we have a nice barrier where because of the fact that I've been shot down on several things out here because of that, and this is the way it's always been put to me, is that because these people have suffered the mosque already, that I can't do stuff with my land. So I've been limited with that, and I've been sitting on this land for 3-4 years now and can't sell it. But we are limited to residential, and we want to build something there. But as long as we got a good barrier and stuff like that, I mean, that's all. If you do approve it, which and I've talked to a lot of the Islamic people, and they're very nice guys. I work with some of them. They're auto people and stuff. But now, when you guys were talking about the sinkhole and all the other stuff, you're right. Now, this property right here, where that adjacent from the thing, that was always a sinkhole right there, because all of my water from my land runs back into that sinkhole, and all of their water runs back to the back. And then the drainage from the front, from the parking lot, and all of that runs right back down this side, back into this area back here. So, but I understood from, which I talked to a gentleman a while ago, and he said that they're going to put a pavilion. Is there a pavilion going up in the back?
Well, there's plans to do like a playground and pavilion.
A pavilion, so that the people that do my residential, hopefully if they build in the back, And that's what I asked them. I said, okay, hey, do you guys like to look at a graveyard whenever you live in your house, or when your house backs up to a graveyard? And I told him that, hey, I'm a real estate agent. Howard Wall's here, and Sally. They'll tell you also that, hey, people don't like so much a graveyard, you know, if they got a house. So if it's going to limit me from selling my piece of property again, then you see, it's just another issue hurdle that I have to get over. Now I got to get over the mosque first. Now I got to get over a graveyard where they're looking at it. And I can tell you that Americans, you know, we tend to go 50-50. 50% of the people say, and Asians won't even come close to it. They won't even look at the piece of property if there's a graveyard close to it. So, I mean, it's just different cultures. But I do agree with the Green Burial Council. I like that. It's because I think we pay way too much money for burials anyway. But I think just a composite box, which would degrade quickly, would be nice. But anyway, just like I say, if you do approve it, please have plenty of greenery and things like that to me.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
I don't know what my pointer will work. I don't think it will.
Joe, let's finish the public hearing.
If you see the REM,
first.
I can't ask him a question?
Yeah, let's listen to the public hearing before. We may need to call somebody else, okay? Let's follow the procedure, okay? Go ahead.
I would like to ask him a question, Mr. Council.
Yes, sir. Joe, let's follow the procedure and listen to our citizens first. And then if we need to, we'll bring them back.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Next. Well, you can't hang around for a minute? Okay, come on around. Okay. If he's got to go.
My pointer does not work. You own the property. Where is the sinkhole? My pointer does not work.
you see where, okay, you see the mosque is built right here, and you see the thing, and then you see where they got the cemetery location.
Yes.
Right there. If you look, well, there it is. Okay, if you go back to the other one.
Go back to the other one so I recognize.
Right.
Okay.
And going up, the pointer, go to the right, up, yep, come on, right there. That's it.
That's sinkhole. And does the water drain towards that cemetery? Okay.
No, I'm saying that my property, which if you look at the REM, my property is just to the right of that. That next line, I own just as much property as the mosque owns.
Okay.
So you're to the right of it.
Yes, sir. I'm to the right. Baptist church is to the left on that triangle. I'm to the right on the rectangle.
What?
All acreage next to it. Yes, sir. But my whole land drains back to this right here, to the sinkhole.
Does any water,
And when he said something, Mr. Green said something about the cemetery being on the highest part of the property, that's bullcrap.
that's correct.
It's not right. Because of the fact that the mosque is on the highest part of the property.
I drove out there. That's the reason I got you back up. That water all drains to that corner, doesn't it?
Drains back to that point over there, which does not affect that cemetery location. So I'm just saying, I'm not, neither for or against it. I hope it doesn't affect me building houses out there and people looking over there and going, hey, I don't want to live close to the cemetery. That's the only thing that I have a real problem with. I've been limited on what I can do with this property.
That answer your question? Thank you. Next.
Jim Nunnery, 1927 Cliffview Court, Murfreesboro. I've been living in Murfreesboro since 1978 as a practicing physician. And I just wanted to address a couple of issues, most of which have been addressed already, and I won't go over all of that. But burial traditionally in America has been done with embalming, caskets, and frequently with vaults. And so when decomposition takes place, and it always does, whether it's caskets, vaults, whatever, not only do you have the body decomposing, but you have the oils, the varnishes, the chemicals that are made for, the boxes are made out of, and, particle board has got a lot of glue and stuff. All of that decomposes, gets out into the surrounding soil. In addition to the body, in addition to that, the embalming fluids that are, in the past, they used arsenic, formaldehyde. Most often they use other chemicals now, but there's still chemicals that are dispersed out into the soil. And so the Islamic way of burying is a green burial with no embalming, no boxes, and so there's less contamination of the surrounding soil. And the composition of a body is 80% made up of nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen. The bacteria in the body disperses very quickly, and most of the bacteria that goes along with decomposition, decomposition of the body is not harmful anyway. So there, as far as that's concerned, if you're going to have a cemetery, that's the best way to have a cemetery if you're worried about contamination of the surrounding area. The traffic issues have been addressed, and I think that with the death rate being what it is, we're not talking about a lot of traffic over a lot of time, and we accommodate that to most of our other churches and our other people that die. What I am concerned about in this community is that we have a long history of how we treat people that are different than we are. When the Catholics first came and established St. Rose's, I'm told by these folks that they were harassed. We had people trying to burn down the Buddhist temple.
Doc, you have about 1 minute.
1 minute, okay, thank you. What I'm concerned about is what we're teaching our children by our intolerance and our harassment of the Islamic temple by continuing to bring up things that are really side issues. And we're disguising the way people feel about that by hiding behind regulations and rules that are indeed impertinent. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Any questions?
Hello, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I live at 1914 Kensington Drive in Murfreesboro, just a few minutes from the Islamic Center. As you can tell from my shirt, I support the Islamic Center, and on the back it says, freedom of religion is for everyone. And that is very true. And I don't have much to add to the details of Mr. Green's very thorough presentation, so I just want to say that there is nothing like the fact that we all die to remind us that we are one humanity. And please do the right thing, approve the cemetery, because there's no reason not to.
Thank you. Next. Hi, Sally.
I'm Sally Wall. I live at 1807 Southeast Broad Street. My great-great-great-grandmother was the first white woman buried in Rutherford County. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't see anything wrong with doing it the way we've been doing it for all these years. Now, the Muslim people got here without due process to start with, and I think we ought to consider a lot of these things before we approve a lot of things that we haven't been doing, and do we necessarily want to get started doing them now? Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Next.
Hi, my name is Lema Spinati, and I live on 1507 Buckingham Drive
Can you,
in
hold on
Murfreesboro.
for a minute, can you give me that name again?
Oh, Lema, L-E-M-A, last name S-B like boy, E-N-A-T-Y.
Thank you.
Got it? Okay. And I live in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I was actually born in Cookeville, but we moved here when I was 1 year old, so I've been here basically my whole life. Each year in the United States, about 22,500 cemeteries are built each year. There's 30 million board feet of hardwood, 90,272 tons of steel casket, 2,700 tons of copper and bronze, about 1 million reinforced concrete vaults. This is all not environmentally friendly. If we want to talk environmentally friendly, then it is obvious that a natural barrier is the most environmentally friendly route that you can take. Furthermore, formaldehyde, the only reason that people use formaldehyde is so that people can look at the body before it is buried. And it actually forces the body to not decompose in the way that it would otherwise if there was a natural barrier. So in fact, it is more environmentally friendly, cost friendly, and better for the actual environment if we did do natural barriers, natural burials. The imminent threat of a sinkhole is something that, a gentleman earlier brought. And are we using like one man's testimony with more brevity than we are the entire report that the staff has been given earlier? Do we think that this many people would be here if it was another gravesite, if it was another burial site? Do we really believe that this would be such an issue that this many people would come and speak out against the Islamic Center's graveyard if it was a graveyard that didn't belong to the Islamic Center? We need to remove these thinly veiled attempts at disguising what really is the issue. The issue is that this graveyard belongs to the Islamic Center of Murfreesboro, and until we recognize that, and until we see that this is the actual issue that we're facing, we're not going to get behind this sinkhole and this threat of earthquake or whatever we have.
You have 30
Thank
seconds.
you.
Thank you. Okay, hold up.
Let me address what you said. We had one graveyard. I've been on this board 6 years. We had a graveyard come before us within the last 3 years. They filled this room up. They were not Islamic. I don't remember the faith I was paying, but the cemetery was turned down. But they were many people opposing that cemetery. It had nothing to do with what race they were. So let's clear that up right now. I'm not against any race whatsoever. And we had one cemetery before. We turned that cemetery down. We sent it back, and it didn't come back before us. So whatever happens here tonight, it's got nothing to do with what you are, what faith you are. Do you understand that?
If I may just say, there are plenty of burial sites in Murfreesboro, and I'm pretty sure not all of them were contested like this one. If you faced one incident where it was contested, then that was one incident. However, there are plenty of burial sites in Murfreesboro, and they were not contested in this way.
Thank you. Next.
Pull that down. You can pull that microphone down a little bit. There you go.
Hi, my name is Jannah Ahmed. I'm in 5th grade, and I'm for the Islamic Center of Murfreesboro's graveyard being built. I was born here, and I want to die here, and I want to be buried here. And I think we should have the right for any other religious place, graveyard to be built.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Syed Rashid.
Can you repeat your name for me, sir?
Syed Rashid. First name S-Y-E-D, last name R-A-S-H-I-D.
Thank you, sir.
I am 83 years old, and I have lived in Murfreesboro since 1987. I have lived in different parts of United States for many years, and settled in Murfreesboro in 1987, and retired from Veterans Hospital, serving the veterans here since 1987. I have been very happy and satisfied living in Murfreesboro, and decided to live here for my last years of life. I'm very thankful to Murfreesboro community for letting us build our place for worship, which we needed, and I'm very happy about it. The last thing I wish now is a place for my resting place that I'm looking forward to in Murfreesboro. I hope I get a place for burial and for my final resting in Murfreesboro, in our Islamic Center, where there is a space we had designated, we had thought that we will be able to establish for burial for our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone who has not had a chance to testify before the BZA? Please come at this time because we're going to close the public hearing shortly.
And Mr. Chairman, prior to the close of the public hearing, I ask if the rules permit for an opportunity on behalf of the applicant for rebuttal.
Okay.
My name is Abdul Kitti. I've been a resident of Rutherford County for about 8 years and Tennessee for about 15 years. I want to just answer several things here. The application presented to you today is about regulations and neighbors. The regulations have already been answered by the staff. Now you have two concerns that you brought that could be legit and could be not debatable. The first one is about the geo information, and ICM presented a report to you from 3 years ago, and you contested that you want a new report. And my question to the engineer, does the geo information change in 3 years that significantly to where you want to bear the applicant further expenses to do another one? Is there a reasonable reason for such a request? From my basic information, there is not. Geo information does not change unless there is a major earthquake, volcano, or a major change in the area that I've not been aware of one in the area. The second thing was about your water contamination or soil contamination, which has been answered thoroughly to my knowledge. The notion here, the neighbors, Mr. Nixon brought a very good point about basically the fencing or the visibility of the cemetery, which I believe Mr. Fathi in the last meeting addressed that very thoroughly, and they will be building a fence and a green barrier, kind of fencing around the area as well. The next thing I want to address here very quickly, and Ms. Snow said that this is not the way we buried in this area. I personally respect the way burials are going today, but it is not about how it's going, it's about laws and regulations. The regulations permit both ways of burials, and we have to respect the fact that both can exist at the same time in the same county. Mr. Whaley earlier said that he's been helping with funeral services for about 30 years. How many Jewish people have you buried? How many Muslim people have you buried? The customs are different, the culture is different. And the fact is, both can coexist together. This is what America is about, coexistence. Differences all regulated under the same legal umbrella. That's what we're here for. That's what we are asking for you to recognize our right as Muslims, which I am,
30 seconds.
To live with you under the same roof, governed by the same regulations and laws, but be different. Thank you so much.
I got some questions.
Thank you.
I got some questions. Could I be buried in that graveyard?
If the ICM,
I'm a Baptist.
I am not in the board of ICM. I am not in their governing organization. You may ask that question to them. I'm not sure.
I would like to ask someone before the meeting closes.
I'm not the person to ask that question. And another thing I want to add quickly, I do own 3 properties in that map she's showing on there, so I am a neighbor of that property. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question, just be for, I guess, for Eric, a point that he brought up. He was talking about the
Can we hold on to that until we get all of it?
Well, I don't know, Mr. Chairman. I got a question now, and that thought might leave my mind, so why it's on my mind.
You all are not helping me a lot with this, 3 minutes.
But this is for our engineer. The question he brought up about the soil site, and about the geo study that was done in 2010, reference back to what Michael said earlier, that study right there, though, those bore sites, none of those were done in the area where the cemetery is proposed. Is that correct?
My understanding of that geotechnical report, and I was not county engineer when that report was submitted in 2010. The intent of that report was to look at that closed depressions in the back that's been referred to tonight as a sinkhole. And the way I interpret that report, it says that that is not a sinkhole. It's just a closed depression, okay?
Right.
Now, I think there are 8 borings on that geotechnical report, and one of them is in that vicinity of the closed depression. And
I'm looking at the map. I mean, we got a copy of the map here, so
right.
Yes.
And to answer the gentleman's question, and typically, no, geotechnical conditions don't change over a short time. So, but as far as where that boring, it's in that closed depression area, but I don't think it falls exactly in the area of the cemetery.
Right. Well, this total site is a 15-acre site, but where they're proposed is about a acre and a half, I think. I mean, the bore site, I don't know what the scale is on here, but the closest bore site by the map I'm looking is a pretty good way. And I know anything doesn't change, but I'm saying, but none of the bore sites are in that 1.5 acres parcel where they're proposing the cemetery. And with that being said, I'm just saying, last month, that was part of my motion for us to defer to this month, whether it was upon them to do it to get some soil for that area. I mean, I don't know if they didn't want to go to the expense, but I'm just saying they presented what was already done in 2010, but that did not include the site that we're talking about with the cemetery. I just want to make that.
Mr. Bratcher, if I could add something to what Mr. Hill was just talking about. I believe the closest one, and the one he was referring to, if you look on page 7 of that geotech study, it kind of goes back to boring B8, which is in the area of that closed depression, which is the closest one to that cemetery location. And while there may not be a boring exactly in that area of where the cemetery is proposed, when they did have the one burial on the property, according to information provided to me from Dr. Fathi, when they were digging that hole for that one burial, they did dig down about 9 feet, and at that point had still not encountered any rock. So it may not be a boring site specifically mentioned here, but they do have some experience digging in that area, and it does show that there is a significant amount of soil there.
Doug, why would they dig 9 feet for a barrel?
Joe, it's not really a relevant question at this point. You would have to ask them that. As far as the depth of
I'm just trying to say, he said he dug 9 feet. Why would he go about digging 9 feet?
You would have to ask him that. But as I've gone back and said before, during the last meeting, there really aren't any regulations detailing how deep a grave has to be. Why did they go 9 feet? Dr. Fathi could probably answer that question better than I could.
Doug, was when they did all these bores, was this before the excavation of the property or after the excavation?
Before.
Before?
You're talking this geotech study?
Yeah.
This, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hill, but those
They
would
did
have
it
been done
before
prior
they started
to
moving any dirt?
Correct.
Okay.
Jot down your questions. I'd like to get the public hearing part out of the way, and I know you've got a lot of discussion, and we need to go into that. But let's get the citizens up here that need to speak to this group for this testimony, and let's get that out of the way, if you don't mind. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Ahmed Sayed. I'm a resident in Murfreesboro for 4 years. I just want to, I heard the first hearing last month, and there was something that I noticed, that when Mr. Pete Doughty, I'm sorry if I spelled your last name wrong, he mentioned things, and he suggested for the commissioner to wait for a month, and exactly everything, every word he said and suggested, that was the decision of the committee. But let me tell you something about Mr. Doughty, about his real motivation. This is his newspaper, this is what he owned. And this is the article that he wrote that week, last week. And he wrote about Muslims. They haven't contributed anything to enhance the world, especially the United States. And listen to this. They are barbaric by nature, and according to a number of reports, the males have no qualms about having sex with animals. That's the person who stood up before you suggesting that he cares so much about the geography of the place and the environment of the place, but the real motivation is hate. And he continued, and he said, when you see a Muslim woman driving a vehicle with red plates, send that plate number to me. He is calling people, the public, so when they see a woman, Muslim woman with a veil, they see her driving a car with red plate, to send that number to him. This is the person who you took, word by word, his suggestion, to make us wait the whole month for that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Green,
Mr.
representing the Islamic Center.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I got a statement I'd like to make, and I don't know, this last gentleman came up. I actually made the motion last month to have this deferred till this month. Now, I can't control the other 4 members on this board. I made a motion, I got a second, and we had a prevailing decision. I don't like what the gentleman just came up here suggesting that we took Mr. Dowdy's word like this, like Mr. Dowdy runs this board up here. I take a very offense to what that gentleman just said. I vote my conscience up here. I always have and I always will. So I really don't like, I think he's way out of order by coming here suggesting that this board done anything underhanded or done anything suggested by what somebody got up here and spoke. So I want to make that statement clear.
Thank you.
Mr. Demasi, did they submit a report on site distances? In your handout, there's a topo elevation for Bradyville Pike. You'll see by Grace Baptist. It's about a 6-7 foot difference going out of town, about 300 foot from the intersection. Was a site distance test done for shooting elevations away from town? The subdivision that had the turn lane about 450 feet from the intersection had to have a turn lane to the right, but no site distance was done. Latest TDOT study from 2010 is TDOT traffic readings showed traffic east of Bradyville Pike to be about 5,000 cars per day. That question was addressed earlier. I wanted to give you that information. Readings were taken from a fixed point about 1/4 mile east of Veals Road. And on the handout, you can see some of the topo elevations that I gave you all, and you can see the high rise in the road. Normal procedure for site distance in engineering with the engineering report is to conduct to see if you can see the visibility. I know as a past member of the Planning Commission, that was often done for Dollar General stores or whatever, no matter the size. You got to make sure that you can see when people come over a hill and hit. I wasn't going to go into what the last gentleman said because I know what it's like to be targeted and talked about, and I don't want to go there. We all live in this community. But there's some people that are bad people, and there's some people on both sides that are not good. But I think it's important that we realize that we're all equal under the law in Rutherford County. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Green.
I believe, Mr. Chairman, there is one more for public comment.
Were you here last month? Okay, you're out. Come on, yeah. Okay, come on then.
My name's Salim Spinati. Yeah, free speech, I agree.
All right,
to everybody.
all right, go ahead.
So the thing that I want
your name again.
Salim Spinati, and she didn't say her address. Do I have to say mine? If you guys want.
Okay.
1507 Buckingham Drive. So one of the things that I'd like to address is we said the quote-unquote sinkhole, which is just a little dip in the land, is on the far right of the property. Not only that, the gentleman who said his property was near the cemetery is on the total opposite side. Cemetery is in the far left, his on the far right. Another thing that I would like to address is, sir, we're talking about a cemetery here. It's not just dead bodies. Also, if you want to be buried next to a bunch of Muslim people, come on over. We're not saying no. You're welcome to be wherever you want. But also, can I go to wherever I want and say, can I get buried here? Would people have a problem with that? You don't think so? Well, if people don't have a problem with that, I would love to get buried wherever. But see, I want to get buried next to my family members, next to my friends. I want to get buried like you guys do, right? So why do I have to oppress myself into getting buried a certain way? Correct? Another thing I'd have to address is you're saying why, or you're asking the question, can I get buried here? This is not the place to ask the question. This is a place to look at the regulations and are we following the laws in order to get this cemetery? You can ask that question somewhere else. I know this rests on your decision, but if you want to ask that question, come on over, get buried with us, but ask that question somewhere else, not here, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you staying within the time limit.
I am the Imam of the Islamic Center and I came to respond to your questions. You are welcome to come to bury in the Islamic Center if you want. And they will be happy to have you. And as far as the casket, I said last month, the religion does not make it mandatory for us to go one way or the other, but we're supposed to go as humble as we can. If you want everyone in the county to have a casket, have it as part of the law and we'll be happy to obey the law. Nothing in our religion prevents us from having a casket if this is the law. We're being ordered by our religion to obey the law of the land. I remember for the gentleman last month, when we mentioned about the deep, how deep can we go in the soil, and I remember mentioning to him afterwards that we had a burial. And if you recall this burial, it was a chaos then. And fortunately, the one dig this grave was not a Muslim guy. He was a Christian guy, and the people asked him afterwards about the kind of soil, and we went deep enough. Nothing is out in our religion make it mandatory for us to go 9 or 8 or 6 feet in the ground. But we went as deep as we could, because some people then accused us of not going deep enough while burying our people. If you want us to go 5, 6, 7, any measurement will be fine with that. Our religion is absolutely okay with this. So I want to be sure about the issue of the casket. It is simply because the law in the state of Tennessee does not require us to do so. And for some people saying the Muslims want to have a cemetery, if the people in our wonderful county, Rutherford, decide to have one cemetery for all of the residents, of this county will be happy to be part of this cemetery. Since different congregation has different cemetery, we decide to have one. If you want us all as a people to be in the same cemetery, do one for all of us and cancel this 400 plus, and we'll be happy to be part of it. The Muslim community, and I felt bad if everyone came here intend to say, I've been here 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, 40 years. Even if you are here today, I think we are all, Muslim or non-Muslim, we have to respect the law. If you have any trouble with any Muslim or non-Muslim, report to him, and I support you while doing so. If any resident in our county, Muslim or non-Muslim, decide to do anything bad, I will be with you against him, and this is the law.
You have 30 seconds.
Yes, and please know for a fact that the Muslim community cares about this county. For someone to say that the Muslim did not contribute to this society or to the history of the human being, for me as a Muslim, it is like someone saying the American never did anything with anyone. This is nonsense. People contribute.
Sir,
people in general.
Sir, your time's up.
Thank you very much for your time, and we'll be happy to answer any religious question related to the cemetery. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Rebuttal. Point by point, as the adjacent property owner expressed concern about the appearance of the cemetery, let me please remind the board that pursuant to the staff report, there will be no monuments at the cemetery, and there are dense green buffers that are already in place in the plan for purposes of the cemetery. In addition, there are green buffers that have been planted and will continue to be planted around the facility itself and the parking area. As the engineer stated, there is not a sinkhole on the property, and as the adjacent property owner pointed out, contrary to the concern about a depressed area in the cemetery location, as the adjacent property owner pointed out, the depressed area is to the, am I correct in saying to the right is the south? It may be, but in any event, it is away from the cemetery location. A question was asked about why was the burial that has already been approved on the site at 9 feet. It is evidence that there is more than adequate depth in the location of the cemetery to accommodate a burial of that depth. Although, as has been pointed out, there are no specific legal requirements for the depth of a grave. The point is that there is ample, as proven by the grave that is already in place there, there's ample soil to conduct further burials. Let me please remind the board, as has been pointed out and as was noted at the last hearing on this application, although in the last several years there's only been one cemetery application to come before the board, it was not, as has been stated, denied. Additional requirements were imposed upon the applicant, and the applicant chose not to return. We do not know why that is the case. Let me please state that the location of the boreholes, which are clearly and specifically identified in the Geoservices report, are frankly irrelevant to the location of the cemetery, as has been stated and as is delineated very specifically in the staff report. All of the burials in this cemetery must be in accordance with all of the applicable local, state, and federal requirements. That's regarding every conceivable rule that applies to a burial, whether that be groundwater contamination, soil depth, burial composition, body preparation. The Islamic Center is not asking for approval to do anything other than what already occurs in burials in Rutherford County. I'm happy to answer any further questions. Let me please, by way of closure, tender for the chair's consideration and circulation among the board, and I apologize that I do not have copies for every board member, this petition that is titled Neighbors of the Islamic Center of Murfreesboro Petition to the Board of Zoning Appeals, Rutherford County, Tennessee. The undersigned are informed about the plan to use a portion of the ICM property by its congregants as a private cemetery, and as was stated in the public hearing by the Planning Commission staff, understand that the application of the ICM to the Board of Zoning Appeals meets all of the requirements of the applicable Rutherford County zoning regulations, and that such use of the property by the ICM as a cemetery will at all times be done so only in full compliance with all applicable federal and state and local laws, rules, and regulations. The undersigned reside reasonably close to the ICM and with knowledge of the planned cemetery support its plan. There are 56 names and addresses and contact information on this petition. If I might approach, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And that's all I've got in rebuttal.
I got some questions.
Yes, sir.
They claim this is a private cemetery. What I was getting at a while ago when I asked could I be buried there. Are they going to have people from other cities be buried in this graveyard? If so, are they going to sell graves? You know, if it's a private graveyard, it should be just for the members only. Is that what it is or not? Will other people from other cities be buried in this graveyard?
Let me state prefatory, sir, that I do not know. And let me state that as a matter of relevance, whether or not that occurs is not germane to the board's decision.
Well, if it's going to be, if this grave's going to be sold, it would be considered a commercial graveyard. Is what I'm trying to get at. Is it commercial or is it private? If they're selling graves, in my opinion, it would be a commercial graveyard.
There has been no suggestion before the board, nor is there any indication whatsoever in the application before the board that this is to be anything other than a private cemetery. If you have information to the contrary.
I don't have any. I'm trying to get it.
And there is none.
Is someone here that might know?
Dr. Isam Fathi chairman of the building committee of the Islamic Center of Murfreesboro has just stated unequivocally, sir, it is a
Members only.
private cemetery.
Members only.
He did not say that, sir. He said it's a private cemetery. You are not a member of the ICM, yet you have been granted permission by Sheikh Osama Bilal to be buried there.
Thank you.
And is there anything further, sir?
I'm just curious if whether graves would be sold.
And I think Dr. Fathi, I think Dr. Fathi answered that question. I'm happy to answer further questions should you have them, sir. Mr. Chairman? Thank you, sir. Thank you, gentlemen.
Howard?
Mr. Chairman, out of order, please. I thought the public hearing had been closed.
It hasn't yet.
Spoken 10 different times, I think I can speak
No,
once.
I have not closed it.
Mr. Chairman, I asked to be heard in rebuttal and
Well, I'm rebutting then. I'm rebutting.
Let's
you.
not get into an argument here.
My name is
My
Howard
ruling
Wall.
is it has not been closed. Thank you.
I would request then, pursuant to the rules, an opportunity for rebuttal if such is necessary.
Okay.
Prior to the close.
I'll consider that. Thank you.
Good evening, Zane. How you doing? My name is Howard Wall, and I'm a real estate agent. About 35 years in Rutherford County. I'm from this county. Come to you by way of Halls Hill, better known as Cedar Snag, about 7 miles east of here. The federal court acted without evidence of the chancellor's ruling of the Open Meetings Act and site plans. They overruled Judge Corlew and opened up the mosque for Ramadan. Due process was taken away from the citizens of Murfreesboro. Now, this is my point. The case is still on a legal challenge, and the county cannot go ahead without prejudicing our rights to appeal and due process. January the 7th, 2014, yesterday, a motion was filed with the Tennessee Supreme Court to stay all county actions to approve ICM development until we can be heard by the Supreme Court of the United States of America. All of our country. We must abide by it. Thank you, Mr. Cantrell.
Thank you, Howard.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Rebuttal, please.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I want to make a statement here. I mean, I don't have a problem with Mr. Green coming back up here. A few things I want to make point. When we started this meeting, we said we were going to stick to 3 minutes. That hasn't happened. I mean,
Part of it has been because of the questions that come up.
I understand, Mr. Chairman, but if we're going to say 3 minutes, we need to be 3 minutes on
I'm
everybody.
trying to get it as close as possible.
Okay, and another thing I want to state, this is not a court of law. He's talking about he's going to have the last rebuttal. This isn't a court of law. This is a public hearing for the board of zoning hearing.
It's still a public hearing,
I
and we're going to
understand
give
that,
him
but
a
it's not
couple of minutes.
I understand it, Mr. Chairman, but it's not a court of law.
Understand. But when we get into the questions section, that's what runs these so long. And that's what I was trying to get across, that we need to stick to getting whatever the citizens need to say, get that out of the way, and then we can have all of these discussions.
I understand that, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm a member of this board, and I guess I got other things I would like to go do with my family, but I don't care if it goes to midnight. I want to make sure I hear all the sides of everything that needs to be said. I'm not trying to rush home to do anything. I mean, I guess I'd probably rather be home with my family sometimes too, but I don't want to be I want to rush to do anything else. I want to make sure I hear all the facts before I make my decision.
That's what we're trying to do.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
The letter noticing the letter
Mr.
from the
Green.
commission, the letter noticing the applicant of this hearing states, and I read, the chairman will open the public hearing for those who wish to speak in favor of or against your request. Before the chairman has closed the public hearing, you, the applicant, can ask to be recognized so that you may rebut any statement made during the public hearing.
You've got your chance.
And I want to be sure.
I'm ruling that you have your chance, sir.
Yes, sir. You have asked on a number of occasions for all who wish to speak in public comment come forward, and there are
It's
still.
in. It's in.
It
This
is in.
it.
Yes, sir. The last speaker, and I appreciate the patience of all the members of the board and staff, there has been no court order entered that stays this board's proceeding. In the absence of such a court order, this board, pursuant to the rules and regulations of Rutherford County and the state of Tennessee, have to, as was pointed out at the last hearing, render a decision this evening. in the absence of a court order to the contrary. I'm happy to answer any further questions. I know that this has gone on.
I'm going to close the public hearing at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much.
Doug, I'm going to ask you at this point to be available for any of the questions that have been brought up at this time by board members concerning the recommendation.
I got a question. One that Luann passed out. January the 7th, 2014, the motion was filed with the Tennessee Supreme Court to stay all county actions to approve ICM development until we can be heard by the Supreme Court of the United States. Is this true or is this false?
I'm going to turn this over to Mr. McCreary for him to address this.
It is true that a motion was filed by the plaintiffs in the action that we discussed at the last meeting. We had kind of a history at the last meeting of the litigation, and I started at the beginning and brought you forward. And it is correct that by electronic transmission last night we received a copy of a motion that was filed with the Tennessee Supreme Court asking for a restraining order. To our knowledge, as we sit here, no such order has been entered.
Joe?
Another question. I guess someone said that we had to make a decision tonight. I don't think that's true according to the regulations. It says no more than 90 days. I just want everybody to understand that. It says that in the codes, okay?
That is correct.
Okay? So,
And let me just,
I wanted to bring that out, okay?
Let me just explain.
I'm not saying that that's what we're going to do tonight, okay? Let me finish up. I've done a lot of studying about this, and I've got a lot of mixed emotions about it. I guess the biggest thing that I have a problem with is the state, nor the county, nor the city wants to come up with any guidelines or conditions for cemeteries. And I can understand why, because it'll be hard to enforce them. But the other thing that I want to point out is when we come up here to try to make a decision, and we try to get as many of the facts as we can. All right? When the Planning Commission looks at a site plan, they look at everything on a site plan when they bring a site plan before them. Okay? They look at how much green space, how deep the concrete's going to be, how deep and what the size of the buildings is, and all of that. We've got rules and regulations in effect to that, but we don't have anything for cemeteries. That's the thing that bothers me the most. The last cemetery that came before us, they brought a plan up here, had the grave sites numbered out and laid out. We don't have that in this one. We don't have anything other than a general layout of saying this is where the cemetery is going to be. It don't tell me how many bodies are going to be buried there. We've already discussed about how they're going to bury them. I've done a lot of research about that. And I think there was, at some point in time, somebody made a comment about there was no place around here for the Islamic people to be buried. The mosque in Nashville has a cemetery. I'm not sure where it's at. Found this out. I talked to several funeral directors. I talked to several cemeteries. I have done a lot of research on this. And I have a lot of mixed emotions about this. And, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have a recess.
Okay. Anyone else want to recess? Let us answer one thing here on the 90-day. Doug, you need to deal with that.
Yes, sir, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. When we last had the meeting, I think the comment was made that 60 days from the time of the application was the time frame you had in order to make a decision. Looking further into the code, and there's a paragraph right after that one that basically that says essentially, and I'm just kind of not reading it directly, but says within 90 days after the board first hears the application, a decision has to be made. Now, at the time when I first said the 60 days. I don't know if I just saw the 60 and just automatically thought that was it and then go into the next paragraph. At this point, I really don't remember what happened. But to answer Joe's question, he is correct. The special exceptions do have a 90-day provision in there. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that you have to take the full 90 days to make a decision on an application. You know, we've considered this particular application now. This is the second time, and really we're down to the same topics we were talking about. You know, at this point of the meeting, I don't see what a further delay would accomplish. But that's my thoughts on it at this point. Now, as far as a recess is concerned, I know we've been here for a little while. It's not uncommon to do that. But just as a word of caution for everybody, of course, you know, we still are under the provisions of the Sunshine Law. So, you know, if we are going to take a break, obviously no deliberation or anything like that about that. And I'm not saying you would. I'm just saying, just to put it out there, that, you know, I mean, obviously you guys can say hi, whatever, those things are great. But obviously no deliberation on this matter or any matter that's on the agenda.
On a break.
Yeah. I got one question I want to ask Mr. McQuarrie, our attorney, since it was brought up about the motion was filed on January the 7th, and I know you say this motion was a file to stay all actions, but you say that would be correct, but I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So you say that the motion has been filed, but the court has not taken any action on what?
On the motion. So
Okay.
in other words,
Just because they hadn't taken any action doesn't mean they're not going to.
right, well, I assume at some point in time, they will take some form of action on the motion. I would assume that is a logical conclusion. My statement was that as we sat here, the court had not taken any action or granted the motion. So the comment was made earlier that they had requested a temporary restraining order, which is true. The motion requests a temporary restraining order. But it is not true that as we sit here, at least to our knowledge, if someone knows different, certainly we'd want to know that and comply with a court's order. But as far as we know, and we did check, the court had not acted on the motion, which would require this body to proceed in its typical fashion.
Okay. So even though they filed the motion, the court hasn't taken any action. We don't know why. I don't know if they just got. I guess my thing is, if this motion's been filed, even though the court hadn't heard it and made the decision whether they're going to grant the stay, if we took any type of action and then tomorrow they granted this stay, what kind of liability or where would that leave the county?
Well, obviously I can't telegraph what the court might say in a order that doesn't exist, but assuming for a moment that the court granted some kind of restraining order after this meeting, in the first instance, I suspect that's unlikely because the specific request in the motion is to restrain, in essence, this meeting, and this meeting is occurring. So I suspect the court's not going to enter an order to restrain a past act. But having said that, if this meeting proceeds and there is no order prohibiting it from proceeding, then I don't think a restraint is entered tomorrow or the next day or the next would affect what you did tonight.
Jerry?
I just want to ask our staff, are we still where we were last month when the application meets all criteria that we require of it for private cemetery?
Our staff report has not changed from last month. To answer your question, yes, we are still in that same location.
Then the cemeteries that are across the county, the private cemeteries, they don't require them to do a geo study.
Since my time with the county, we have not required any kind of a study like that. And now, in fairness, the only other cemetery we've considered is the one that we've talked about on Burton Knob Road. Now, of course, that one ended up being deferred for other reasons. I think we even talked about that last month. There were some floodplain issues on the property and some other things. Ultimately was withdrawn by the applicant for their own reasons. So we don't have just a whole lot to compare it to as far as that. But traditionally, under the older zoning resolution, even before my time here as the planning director, or even as part of planning staff, as far as private burials and things like that were concerned, they just simply weren't regulated by the county. And again, when you look at the state requirements for private burials, when you look at the state requirements for religious burials, those kind of issues, when you look at the state laws regarding those issues, they are simply exempt from the requirements that you see for commercial cemeteries. Kind of go back to Mr. Krau's question about, if they're going to be selling burial plots, to other places, if they start engaging in activity that is considered by the state to be commercial in nature, that's something they'll have to deal with the state. Again, that is not something that we would have really any say in, just because of the regulations that we have in the zoning ordinance. Doesn't really go into that. The state handles the differentiation between what's a commercial and what's not a commercial cemetery. So even if they did decide to start selling plots, they would have to answer to the state on that and whatever the state guidelines would be at that time, which again goes back to the comment that I've made and I believe Mr. Green made while he was here earlier, that regardless of the action taken here, if the application were to be approved, does not excuse them from any other regulations that exist that are out there. They still have to meet whatever state and federal regulations are there. And I think Mr. Machado can speak to this, with the amount of research I know that you said you did. You pretty much found out the same thing that we found out through all this, that there really aren't that many regulations when it comes to cemeteries, when it comes to burial depth, when it comes to embalming or not embalming, when it comes to using a casket or a vault. I know there was one person that spoke at the very beginning and said that's all he's ever done. That's all well and good. If that he's buried folks in vaults and in coffins, that's fine. That is not a state requirement in the state of Tennessee to have to do that. So,
As in your time here, has a cemetery been a problem that you know about in the county?
I don't recall, and I've been with the county now since 2006 and planning director since 2007. I do not recall ever getting a phone call about somebody with an issue with a cemetery. I just now, I could think of something when I go home, 7 years can be a long time, but to my knowledge, I can't think of anybody who's ever called to complain about an issue with a cemetery. Sometimes we do run into issues with subdivision development that have older burials, old family burials that are on land. We do have to take precautions on those to make sure that they're not disturbed, to make sure that there is access provided to them, because there are regulations and state laws regarding access to cemeteries, especially in development. And that's not, you even see that in the city, not just in the county. I live down the road from a commercial site that actually was developed, and there's a small cemetery, and they had to leave a little access way for it. So it's not uncommon to deal with. But that's probably the closest thing I've ever come to any kind of a complaint.
Yeah, one question, Mr. Chairman, kind of goes along with Jerry, just the question he just asked Mr. DeMasi. I know other than the cemetery we have before us and the one we had last year, year before, I don't know if you've done any looking back or research or anything, Mr. DeMasi, maybe before you became the planning director. When was the last cemetery that came before the Board of Zoning? Before
the one from on Burton Knob Road?
Yes.
Yeah, I really couldn't answer that question. To answer your question, I really haven't looked that far back to see how many cemeteries there were.
Right.
I've been on the BZA since the 1970s. We've had two, this one and the one before. There's never been another cemetery that's been before the BZA.
So I the point I'm just trying to make, and I think Jerry brought up a good question. Has there been any controversy? Well, I'd say no, because these are this group right here is here in the last two that has had any. And then I go along with what he says, Joe says over here about, I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of unanswered ones. And, then again, nobody wants to take wants to make any regulation, then we're sit here trying to, I guess you can say just a little old board here in Rutherford County, try to make a decision on what's the best thing to do right here, so.
And if I can address that, Mr. Bratcher, just quickly. And I understand the frustration that you all have with that. You know, Mr. Machado and I have talked a little bit about it. And, you know, again, he's pretty much found the same thing that we found, that there really is just not a lot of regulation when it comes to cemeteries. And I can understand that that can be troubling. The proper venue for that, and at that point, is to attempt to change the laws. Legislating from the Board of Zoning Appeals is not really the appropriate action here. It's talk to the state legislatures, talk to the local legislatures, change the laws.
I would also respond in this way to that. You're asking if there have been controversies about cemeteries. The reason there have not been is cemeteries have just been off the books, under the radar. It's just not regulated by law, and I know there are reasons for that. And I agree with Doug, we can't become legislators, legislating the law. We have to follow what the law is. Now, I know there's a lot of people here that feel like that it ought to go one way or the other, but the thing that you have to do as a board member is follow the regulations that we have, regardless of whether we like it or not. Now, we can put on some requirements if they are reasonable, but we just need to remember that and follow the law. And before we get into making any kind of motions, I'm going to ask our attorney to give us his legal opinion on where we are at this time. Joe?
I got something. The Green Burial Council states that it should require surveys, biological, geological, and hydrological, to be done, determine whether burial should or should not be done. I have a problem with, I own a well. I drink water out of it. And I live on a farm. You can dig a post hole on my farm this time of year, 2.5 feet deep, and water will come up in the bottom of that post hole. Okay, you bury somebody 6 feet in the ground, water's going to come up in there. All water goes back to the water table. Am I correct, Mr. Hill? Rainwater goes into the ground, goes back into the water table, goes back into my stream that supplies my well. I know there's no laws requiring that, but even the Green Burial Council states that should be done before you make it legal for someone to be buried out of a casket and out of a vault. I'm 77 years old, born September the 19th, 1936, went to my first funeral when I was 11 years old. I've never known I've been a pallbearer many times. I've never known anybody that was not buried in a casket, and I can't recall where my great-grandfather was buried in a vault or not. That was the first one I went to. But everyone since I've been grown has always been buried in a vault. I am a farmer. I have a well that I drink out of. I would hate to live close to a graveyard that had 2,200 grave slots, and people be buried out of a casket. I live near a cemetery, and when I've been out 22 years, even though those are buried in caskets, that goes through my mind. It bothers me sometimes to even drink that water, knowing that cemetery is close to me. That's my problem with the situation. And I don't have anything against any nationality.
And Mr. Corral,
I'm not racist in any way.
And I would go back to the comment I made just a few moments ago. I'm not saying I don't understand your concerns, but as Mr. Cantrell stated a little earlier, you know, we are bound to look at the laws that are in the zoning ordinance. If you don't like the laws the way they are, attempt to change the laws. You know, we can't legislate from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Now, talking to Mr. Cantrell's point about the conditions on property, on conditional use permits, or special exceptions as we call them now, it is correct. The Board of Zoning Appeals, and I'm going to read this directly out of our zoning ordinance, It says, "The Board of Zoning Appeals may impose such other conditions and restrictions upon the premises benefited by a special exception permit as may be necessary to comply with the provisions set out hereafter in this section in order to reduce or minimize the injurious effect of such special exception upon and ensure compatibility with surrounding property and to better carry out the general intent of this ordinance." And I think that last part really is the important part, is that it needs to carry out the intent of this ordinance. Any conditions that are placed on any condition, or special exception as we call them now, any condition that is placed on there has to be objective and reasonable to the request that is being made. Now, you may say, what exactly does that mean? It means there has to be reasonably related to why you're asking the condition to be on there to begin with. Something else, and I'm going to ask Mr. McCrary to make a few comments about this as well. There was a handout that we made at the very beginning of well, actually, I guess it was at the 4 o'clock meeting, regarding Public Chapter 573. Now, upon looking at the handout, it looks like page 2 somehow inadvertently got left out, but we do have a full copy of that. This particular act is known as the Tennessee Religious Freedom Act, in short, which basically says that in the state of Tennessee, a government cannot put any kind of burden on the free expression of religion. Any condition that you do put down on any kind of a religious use has to be done with that in mind. Is this going to create some sort of a burden to the free expression of religion? And again, I think Mr. McCrary may have some comments he may want to make to that effect, as well as conditions in general.
Well, I'm happy to address what I think the law is, and I'll leave the application and the decision to you all. So let me talk first, just for a second, about special exceptions. I think it's important in terms of case law and the way the courts review these to recognize in the first instance that this is a special exception, which we all know, but I say that because it's not a rezoning, it's not a variance, it's not a site plan review, it's none of those things. And it is its own special, unique creature, if you will, under the law, and it's reviewed in a specific way under the law. A special exception, by definition, is a use that's already permitted in a particular zone, subject only to the requirements or conditions that are spelled out in a zoning resolution. And so it's with that limited review that you come into your initial review of a special exception. As relates then specifically to this special exception, you have specific requirements in your zoning resolution then that would need to be met and that would be proper for consideration in reviewing this special exception. And there in section 1408, there are general requirements found there for special exceptions. And they're in section 1103 where there are a few requirements specific to cemeteries. There is case law on this point. I'll give you one site. There are many. There's a case called the Mumbrium versus Metro Board of Zoning Appeals, which has a good discussion about what a special exception is and what it isn't. And it clearly says in that case that the reviewing board, in this instance, that's you, can only grant or deny a request dealing with a special exception based solely on statutory law or something that's found in your zoning ordinance. So again, that review is really fairly limited under the law. It's also correct that under your zoning resolution, you are left open the possibility of putting on some additional requirements, I'll call them, potentially at least, but case law speaks to that too, and that opportunity to put on additional conditions is not without limits. And I'll submit to you that under case law, you can probably glean 3 primary principles for additional conditions that you might put on a special exception that other than are found directly in your zoning resolution. One is it needs to be related to a requirement that is in the zoning resolution. In other words, you're not just creating some new requirement that doesn't already exist in some shape, form, or fashion in your resolution. It ought to relate to something that's already in there as a requirement. Number 2, it needs to be based on some rationale and basis that can be explained and the necessity of that requirement articulated in some way. So if you want to put on some additional condition, you need to be able to explain why it's necessary and why it relates to this particular application. And number three, I think case law supports that any additional condition needs to be directly related to the impact in question. So and in this application, all you're dealing with is a cemetery. So any condition or consideration that you make would need to relate directly to the impact that a cemetery would have, not anything else that's already been approved, just what's in front of you. And so that, generally speaking, I think is what the law is with respect to special exceptions. Speaking or commenting briefly on what Doug mentioned a minute ago, it is worth noting, and this has been part of the sort of related litigation that's been brought up several times, is this Tennessee Religious Freedom Act. It's Public Chapter 0573. I have the second page, and that law was passed in 2009, and it says, and I'm quoting here so that you know what the law is, that no government entity shall substantially burden a person's free exercise of religion unless it demonstrates that application of the burden to the person is, number one, essential to further a compelling governmental interest, and two, the least restrictive means of furthering that compelling governmental interest. So, there's obviously, as is often the case with statutes, there's several terms in there that you could say, well, what does that mean? And a couple of those are defined, so I'll mention them. I said just now, it says no government entity shall substantially burden. That term, substantially burden, is defined in the statute. And substantially burden means to inhibit or curtail religiously motivated practice. Now, there's no further definition beyond that, but that is the definition of substantially burden. I'll also mention to you that the word demonstrates, so it says the government shall not substantially burden a person's free exercise of religion unless it demonstrates that application of the burden to the person is 1 and 2, which I'll come back to. But demonstrates under this statute is under a clear and convincing standard, which matters if you're interested in the law, because most often in civil cases, it is a preponderance standard, which means more likely than not. Clear and convincing is something higher than that. I can't put a percentage on the burden that creates, but clear and convincing is something more than a preponderance. And so to the extent, and I'm not passing judgment on whether any potential condition does or doesn't relate to anyone's religion. I'm just telling you what the law says. And the law says that to the extent that any burden, any condition would substantially burden a religious exercise, it would need to meet those criteria. It would need to further an essential, compelling governmental interest. So anyway, that is generally speaking what the law is with respect to special exceptions, and more specifically with religious uses in Tennessee. And I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Joe?
Well, could you just kind of give me a quick rundown on why you think our county and our city and our state has not come up with some kind of specific guidelines for cemeteries, period, via being religious, private, or whatever?
No, I can't do that. I don't know the answer to that question.
I'll echo him on that. I really couldn't begin to tell you why.
Okay, well, I want to make a statement here. I want everybody to understand that what's fixing to happen, I guess we're going to come to a vote here, and the way I vote will have nothing to do with being an Islamic, whether it was a Catholic cemetery, Jewish cemetery, or whatever kind of cemetery it is. However I vote is because it's a cemetery, and it's because we don't have a lot of laws that govern cemeteries. Okay? Thank you.
Let me also add a couple of things for you all to consider. I know this is problem for everybody. We've got all kinds of opinions about this. And we're trying to resolve within our own minds what is best for this little community. But we also need to decide what is best for this entire county, not just one section of the county. Now, here's what we've got to look at. Our attorney, our staff have all said that this cemetery meets the regulations, and primarily because of the religious freedom that we have in this country. That's the bottom line, the way I see it. Now, we can bring up all of these additional things which are really not related to it. What we need to decide as a BZA, is this an appropriate site for a religious cemetery? And that's what it's going to come down to. If we turn this down, there's really no defense. And you can ask our attorney on that. There's no defense in your heart, there's no defense in your mind, and there's no defense legally for it. I'm convinced of that. If there were regulations, I think these legislators should have given us the authority to put those regulations down, where we could have made some of those decisions. But we can't regulate it as a board. Now, you may want to try to do that, but that is exactly where we are. Now, I would like, at this point, to entertain a motion. We need to vote this up one way, up or down. We don't need to drag this out for months and months. We've given everybody a lot of time to look into this and look at the procedures that we have. The staff is telling us that it complies with all state and local regulations. Our attorney is telling us that. Now, what we need to decide is whether we want to do the right thing or not.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
It meeting those requirements, and I'd make a motion that we approve it.
Okay, a motion is on the floor that it be approved, and we need a second.
I would like to add some stipulations or conditions.
If I could,
Can I do that?
The proper way to handle that would be to second the motion and then have discussion
Go
on the
ahead and
motion. And then you
second the
could
motion,
propose,
and then we can add those to
and
it.
you could propose some
Okay.
amendment, you could propose amendments at
I'll
that
second
point.
it, but I want to make some
Okay, we have a
stipulations.
second to the motion. What are the requirements?
Okay. Beyond what the county has put in the requirements, I would also like to put a number of grave sites. And the reason I came up with this number, there's no numbers presented to us, and how I came up with my numbers has to do with the square footage of the graves, and this is typically, hold on just a minute, I've got my notes here.
What you would like is the outline of the grave sites, is that correct?
Well, I'd like to have a drawing kept of the grave sites, and a specific number put on them. And I came up with a number, and it had to do with the size of the graves that are used and the square footage that's available. And the size of the graves, I came up with typically what cemeteries do. Okay? So one of those, the stipulation that I had was a total of 1,500 at the most grave sites. And the reason I came up with that, and I can explain it, but it just take too long to come up with the square footage. And the other thing was that they said that they were not going to have grave markers other than a small marker. I would like that put in there too, that the markers would not be, stick up out of the ground over, say, a foot maybe, if they're going to put markers. And that's if I can do this, okay? And the other one was, if and when the Islamic Center decided to sell this property, that if this passes, that it goes until the day they sell it. The day they sell it, this special exception expires. One thing is the number of graves, and I think they said that they were going to bury them 8 feet deep. Typical burial is 5 feet deep, so I don't have a problem with, as long as they stay within their 5 feet range, I don't have a problem with that. So I would like to add those stipulations, and some type of a plot as to say, if someone from out of town comes in and wants to see their relative, not have to scurry all over the place, they can go to a common place in the mosque and say, this is general area, have their grave numbered off or whatever. And that's what I'd like to add.
Let me make sure that I've got this clear, okay? Just to make sure that we've got this. Now, what you'll be doing is asking for an amendment to the motion to approve. That's it. What you'll be doing is asking for a motion to amend the motion to approve. That's what you'll be doing. Okay.
Yeah.
But let me make sure I've got this, before you do it, let me just make sure I've got this down correctly. Okay. The first thing you'd like to do is have, basically for them to keep some sort of records on the property indicating where different burials are where they are basically on the property in case something were to happen. Somebody, like you said, from out of town comes in, they want to know where their loved one's buried, a friend's buried. They, rather than have to go walk around, they can actually go and say, okay, it's buried in this area, we can go take a look. Okay, that's one. The second one is you want to limit the number of burial sites to 1,500.
Yes, sir.
Based on the calculation, whatever it was that you came up with.
That most cemeteries use.
And then the third that I heard was the grave markers being under a foot, or a foot or less.
They said they weren't going to be that.
Okay, and they said so.
They said they were going to be down with the ground.
Okay, so you don't. So you're okay with that then? You don't want that in there.
As long as we need to put that in the stipulations that whatever they want, if they want it, if they're going to do it with the ground, even with the ground, then that's fine. But if they're going to go up with them, because I have a picture of a Islamic burial cemetery that's got humongous gravestones in it, and I can't see that happening out there. But that's the reason. That was the reason for this. And the other one was.
I think the last one that I heard was if the property were to sell. Now, let me clarify that. Are you talking if it sells to a commercial establishment? Or are you talking? I mean, if it sells to another religious organization, of course, they would still be exempt from the requirements anyway. Are you really more concerned if somebody were to purchase the property and try to use it in a commercial manner? Is that really what your concern is?
Well, if it sells, period, in other words, even if they sell it to another church, then, well, I guess you could leave it, yeah. But if it sells for something other than
religious use.
Religious use.
Okay. So there were 4 things there. I think that's what I can.
Is that what you want? That's your amendment?
Yes, sir. You may want to just put a note in there, Doug, too, about the depth of the graves. I know a lot of people are talking about the depths of the graves. 5 feet is typical in cemeteries around here. I talked to a guy that's did a lot of burials at the cemeteries in Nashville and mainly the Islamic cemeteries, and he says they dig them so deep there they have to use a ladder to go down there to place the body at the bottom of the grave. So
Well, let me at least say this on that.
Sure.
Some of these conditions, obviously, any condition that is placed on here, you're basically tasking the county with enforcing these regulations. Some of these things, quite frankly, the number of the grave sites, 1,500 sites, that's a lot. Honestly, I don't know if they would ever, and hopefully, I'm sure they hope they never get to that. The small grave markers, again, just from what their comments they've made, I don't think that's going to be a real issue. The selling of the property, now that has the potential from time to time to be problematic for us just because we don't always know when property sells, but that's a little easier to track. When it comes to the depth of a grave, and like we've talked about, we know there's really no regulations for that, and I know you're more comfortable with 5 feet, but understand, there's really no practical way for the county to enforce that. Obviously, I'm not going to be at every burial that they have there with a measuring tape measuring down 5 feet. Okay? I'm sorry, we're just not going to do that. So that would become problematic for the county to try to enforce that. Based on the the information we have received from Dr. Fathi as far as the area back there, they were digging down a good amount, about 9 feet or so, and hadn't hit rock. Personally, that particular condition would be hard for us to enforce. And again, any condition here that you put on here is going to be up to us.
I understand that, Doug, but I also understand that there's a lot of codes out there that y'all have trouble enforcing too. So I would still it would make me feel better personally to say that, you know, I feel like that they're going to bury them deep, but I also feel like that, you know, it might be something come up that the powers to be from there are not there, and somebody decides that they're just going to dig a shallow grave and put somebody in it, and I wouldn't want to see that happen.
Okay, let's vote on the amendment first. Okay?
Yes.
Your amendments.
Do we need a motion for that amendment? How do we handle that?
That's his motion there.
Okay.
I need to second it, though.
Yes. It is accepted.
Huh?
It's accepted.
Oh,
Jerry,
second it?
Jerry
Okay.
accepted it.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could I make a clarification briefly? Before you vote on anything, unless there be any confusion about my comments previously, I initially stated, I think, that my intention was to give you a summary of what the law was, and I expressly said that the decision of applying it was up to you. So I want to be clear, despite what I heard earlier, I was not offering any opinion on whether or not this application complies with your regulations. That's the decision you will make. I was merely giving you a summary of what I understand the law in Tennessee to be. And I don't want there to be a misunderstanding among you with respect to that when you vote in a moment.
Thank you for clarifying that. Now, call a roll on the amendment.
The amendment, yes, sir. Keith Bratcher,
No.
Joe Crowell,
No.
Joe Machoto,
Yes.
Jerry Sartain,
Yes.
Thane Cantrell.
Yes, the amendment passes. Now we'll vote on the motion. Call the roll, please.
Keith Bratcher,
No.
Joe Crowell,
No.
Joe Machoto,
Yes.
Jerry Sartain,
Yes.
Thane Cantrell.
Yes. The amendment and the motions passed. We'll take a short recess.
Application 2014-1 is a request for temporary special exception, approval allowing a burrow pit with relief from the setback and area requirements for burrow pits in the residential medium density zone. The site is located at John Bragg and Woodcraft Road. It's a 22-acre site, and you may be familiar with this. We've processed several applications regarding the extraction of rock from the site. The applicant has continued to comply with the original plan as presented. We were all aware that they would, the time limits imposed by the temporary special exception permits would lapse, and that we would be revisiting this application once again. The applicant has received 3 permits, and we have never received any phone calls. I'm sorry. Okay. Apologize for that. With complaints for the activities taking place on the site. We reviewed the criteria. The applicant continues to meet the criteria, and we posted a sign on the property. These are photos of the site, as you are familiar with. And the applicant is planning to continue to respect the plan that was originally approved by the board. And staff finds that it meets the criteria. That concludes our presentation.
Okay, this has been to us before. We've looked into it a number of times. Do we have anyone here representing this request? If you'll come around, please.
I'm James Jacobs. I'm the one making the request.
You have any comments, any,
We're
how
just
are the
gonna-
things going out there?
It's going about the same. We're going
How
for
much longer do you think you'll be working on this site?
Maybe there another year, maybe there another 2 years.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you. We'll open, you may be seated. You will open this for a public hearing for anyone who'd like to speak on this request. Commissioner P. Is that out in your district?
It is, at least it has been, it still is.
What's going on out there? You're digging up all the land.
Right. Wanted to correct the young lady. There have been complaints made to your department when this first started. That was back when someone else was operating it, though. And I have had some complaints. I haven't had any complaints in the last year or two, and he seems to be complying. The only thing that I wanted to, and the only reason I actually got up here to talk about this is I have some complaints about the trucks that are entering John Gregg Highway from this area. They're not looking and they're just pulling out on the roads. Being a volunteer firefighter, I've helped scrape a few people off that highway there, and you need to make sure that these people that are hauling that material out of there for you are complying with the law and stopping before they turn out of there. And, you know, the Rock Bluff is right up there on the road. I don't know if it helped to widen the front of it. That may be detrimental to what they're trying to do there. But there is a hazard with those vehicles pulling out on the highway, and I want to make sure that that's taken care of. That's all I've got to say. Like I said, I have not had any complaints in the last 3 years. But before that, I did have several. It had to do with how much they were blasting, and I'm not getting that now.
Okay, we'll ask our staff to take a look at that too, okay? Anyone else? Close the public hearing. We have a motion on it.
I move to approve it.
Have a motion to be approved.
Second.
Have a second. Call the roll, please.
Keith Bratcher,
Yes.
Joe Crowell,
Yes.
Joe Machoto,
Yes.
Jerry Sartain,
Yes.
Dane Cantrell.
Yes.
Motion carries, sir.
The next item is a request by Philip Vaughn, and this is for a barrow pit, and this is on McElroy Road.
Aaron Cantrell, application 2014-2 is a request for temporary special exception approval allowing a burrow pit for burrow pits in the residential low-density zone. The application is filed by Philip Vault. It involves a 11-acre site located off of McElroy Road. It's a vacant site that is vegetated, and the applicant is requesting approval to remove soil from the property, and he's proposing to extract less than 1 acre of soil from the site. He indicates that he will restabilize the disturbed areas with vegetation and indicates that there will be no slopes measuring greater than 3 feet to 1, and that all streamline buffers will be met as during the temporary extraction of the site. The applicant has also met with the county engineer and discussed what requirements will be in place if he were to get approval from the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that includes the provision of a road bond for any damage that is done to McElroy Road during the duration of the permit. So these are photos of the surrounding area. Staff did receive several informational calls and a couple in opposition of the requests. One of the calls that we received in opposition actually called today and indicated that they had an opportunity to speak with the applicant, and they were no longer opposed to the request. And we did receive one call today in favor of the request. We posted a sign on the property, and that concludes our presentation.
Do we have anyone here representing this request? If you'll come around, please.
I'm Philip Vault, and I'm the one making the request and the landowner as well.
I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have about the application, as far as what we're planning on doing, that kind of thing.
You have a reclamation plan, you will?
We do. I've met with Mr. Hill, and we have done some test digging and have got a plan together of what we're going to do.
How long do you think you'll be out there?
As far as this permit goes, we're only going to be running 2 trucks, so it won't be a everyday thing. So it may take us some time to do what we want to do. And
okay. Any questions, Joe?
I really, the only thing I see in here about hours of operation is the blasting part of it, unless I'm overlooking something.
We won't be doing any blasting. I know that's in the application. I think that falls under the borough pits, but we won't be doing any
What
blasting.
hours and what days are you going to be hauling out of there?
We would most likely haul Monday through Friday, may haul a few Saturdays, will not haul on Sunday. We go to church on Sunday. So we won't be hauling on Sunday, and probably won't be there at daylight, might be there at dark. But we'll only be running 2 trucks, and they're owner-operated trucks.
Right.
So won't be a lot of traffic in and out, that kind of thing. We've got a plan as far as what we want to do. I know the term borough pit can be a wide range of things. And you think of borough pit, you think of just going down 6 or 8 feet and robbing a bunch of dirt. That's not what I've got in mind here. I've met with Mr. Hill, and we've got a plan together. The deepest we would be going would be 3 feet, most likely. And we would come off the stream bank 30 feet as required and do that, and then restabilize any area that we disturb, grade it back up, and sew it back down. I've got a building site on this track, and I plan to resell this track at some point, and the building site overlooks where we're going to get the dirt, so I'm not going to do anything to devalue that building site. In fact, we plan to use some of this dirt to maybe improve the building site.
Well, you said sometime. Okay, give us a time frame. Year?
Probably more than a year, because, well, as far as for this permit, we'll only be good for 6 months.
No.
But we do plan to, sell some dirt there. But like I say, we don't plan to go any deeper than 3 feet. So whenever we run out of dirt there, we'll. And I really don't have any. Not to give you a short answer, I really just don't have any. Okay. And like I say, if we were going to be running 10 or 12 trucks and going to try to, sell this everywhere, then we would run through it pretty quick. But like I say, we're just running 2 owner-operated trucks, and we've both got other full-time things that we do. So we might haul a few days, and we may be 2 weeks before we go back out there, if that makes any sense.
Thank you.
To answer your question.
Mayor, make a motion.
Other questions?
I'd like to make a motion we approve.
Well, we need to see if we can public.
There's questions for me? Okay, thanks.
We'll open this for a public hearing for anyone who'd like to speak on this.
We just approve what we approve. We're going to give a man a hard time about a mob. This country is becoming something else. I don't care. I'm voting for it.
Hi there, I'm Wanda Thompson, and my husband and I own a bed and breakfast on Vaught Road. And we have a temporary conditional use permit, was what it used to be called, I think, years ago when we applied. We have a high-end bed and breakfast. We have a very long paved driveway that was required by the county when we got our permit. We have people from all over the United States that stay with us. We've had federal judges, we've had all sorts of things, and very lucrative, it's been a lucrative business for us. And the thing that they comment the most about is, your roads are awesome, and this is in the middle of nowhere. And it's a beautiful drive, and I'd like to keep it that way. We have a very nice place. Vaught Road is a very nice road, and you have to get there on McElroy. So you'll be driving right past this dig that they're going to have, and I have no doubt that you haven't come up with a plan to make it nice, but the mud and just the confusion to my paying guest when they come to my house, I would like to avoid. Thank you very much.
Next.
Chairman, members, my name is Jim Fange. I live at 9560 Vaught Road, which is at the intersection of McElroy and Vaught. And as such, use McElroy Road several times a day to get back and forth to my property. I understand this gentleman owns this piece of land and should have the ability to do some of the things he wants to do with it, but I believe that the negative impact upon those of us that travel that road might be something that this board wants to consider. We, our vehicles going back and forth through anything that gets dropped on the roadway. I understand he's going to have to put up a bond to take care of any road repairs, but what is that going to do to any damages that may occur to our vehicle from anything that we roll over before it gets cleaned up or gets fixed? I would appreciate the board's consideration of these things before it makes a decision on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Yes, I'm David Anderson. I live on the corner of Vaught and McElroy, 9565 Vaught Road. And I got on the internet and looked at this site, and according to the Rutherford County internet website, I pulled up the floodplain, and it designates that this area is in a floodplain, and several times a year it floods. And matter of fact, it flooded in December. And because it floods, it has 2 5-foot tiles on it, adjacent to the bridge, and it gets over the bridge there. Matter of fact, the bridge doesn't have any rails on it because it would collect debris on the bridge. These are pictures of the tiles, and as you can see, that there has been water recently going through these tiles connected to this property. And I think that it would be in our best interest not to have any erosion going down Cripple Creek, since it is a nice creek in this vicinity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, my name is Mike Lane. I live at 1018 McElroy Road. Lived there for 22 years. In that time, I've seen Cripple Creek way over the bridge on McElroy Road lots of time each year, making the road not passable. When this happens, most of the 11.66 acres and the right-of-way to it is underwater. I've walked across the road from my property to see it in the past. This could cause an environmental problem with washout and cover the road with mud. Also create a public hazard. The trucks and equipment being on the road, coming and going, will track mud, dirt, and rock and onto the road, making a mess and a hazard for the public traffic using the road. And I'd like to know if a borough pit can be used as a landfill also. This is a problem no one wants. I do not support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I'm Sandra Fange. I live at 9560 Vaught Road. I am against this particular proposal this evening for the reasons of safety for people in the area. That McElroy Road is a two-lane road with trucks going in and out, making a mess, logs, trash, mud. It's going to be hard to see. That is on kind of a curved area going back that way. Also, as Mr. Anderson said, during the bad weather days, I said that fills up, it floods. We're going to have an inundation of critters, mosquitoes, population back there that we have a problem with anyway on flood days back in that particular area that we're going to have to look at. So there's a health and safety issue there as well. I have had the opportunity to work for the bed and breakfast of Mrs. Thompson, and people do make the comments of how quiet and lovely it is back there. And it's a big deal. People do come from all over. Also, we would like to keep that that way, but a matter of, it's nice that the young man would fix the roads, but again, as my husband had said, what about my car? You know, the cars, and then safety of children who are going back during the summer months, during this year that he might be digging. Kids get out there with four-wheelers, they're out there with horses, the possibility of people falling in the muck, getting in and out of there, as kids do, late in the evenings when it's dark. This is a problem that unless some other things were made, I see that as a real hazard.
Thank you. Next.
Chairman and the board, my name is Donald Thompson. I live at 9570 Vaught Road. First of all, my comment is I applaud Mr. Vaught for taking the right steps to get with Mr. Hill to make sure we do this thing right. But I oppose it. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Hill some questions?
No, you need to make your statement.
Okay. Well, I don't know if the Stones River watershed has been contacted. I heard during the cemetery discussion a lot of concerns about water. It is right on the creek. You will be digging a hole, and it's right on the creek in the Stones River watershed, which eventually everybody in Murfreesboro drinks out of the Stones River, and this water will be running into that. So other than the looks, I'm sure that Mr. Vaught, working with Mr. Hill, will do what he says, but where it's at, I don't think it's a good idea, and oppose it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Come around, please. You know, I really don't want to get into a debate over this unless the board wants it. So we'll close the public hearing on this.
Mr. Chairman, I do got a couple of questions. Well, one is going to be for Eric, and I do have a question for Mr. Vaught, or somebody like him to address.
Come on up.
Mr. Hill, and I know Mr. Vaught alluded to, he came to you and talked about what he was going to do, and I think you've got a reclamation plan to do with whatever. With all what he said and what you viewed, I mean, do you have any problems with this?
Well, I met with Mr. Vaught, and let me kind of remind the board what the county's responsibility in these are. And we've talked over the last couple months about how we're kind of reassessing how we do these resource extraction / borrow pits. And the county engineering department, we're trying to do a better job of working with the development community to make sure that these aren't happening when we don't know about it, and that we know what's going on so we can monitor and kind of regulate the things that are happening out there. And so some of those things, and like there was one similar to this that was approved last month. We go out and we do an initial road inspection where we send inspectors out. We look at the road. We actually videotape the road. We walk and videotape the road all the way back to a state road, which in this case would be John Breck Highway. So we monitor the condition of the road, and we work with the highway department on that and do that. We do that. I'll determine a bond amount. Also, along with the bond amount, we have a performance agreement that goes along with that, so that and I've discussed this with Mr. Vaught. Basically, he will put up a sum of money along with his signature saying that if the road fails and the money's not enough, that we will reevaluate that amount. So as far as the road condition goes, and I've already looked at the road, there's a few areas that we're going to look at, maybe even fixing before, if this was approved, get started, so that the road would hold up even better. And so working with the highway superintendent, we're looking at that. As far as inspection goes, first of all, Mr. Vaught he would put in a construction exit, which would help remove a lot of the mud from the truck tires, and that would be something that we would inspect and monitor closely to maintain that that as mud got into those bigger rocks, that it didn't clog up and slick over and drag mud in the street. We nor TDEC likes mud into the street or on asphalt. We don't like that, and so we will
Be more than happy to keep a backhoe on site to clean the road off, that kind of thing. We'll have approximately 150 feet of gravel road between the road and where we'll be digging. So there'll be plenty of, and we won't be hauling when it's wet.
Right.
Just simply can't haul dirt when it's wet. So, there may be a little dirt get up on the road, and we'll be glad to clean it off. I grew up in the Lascassas community, grew up in this county. We're not going to go out there and tear the road all to pieces, drag a bunch of stuff up on the road. I understand their concerns. I have no problem with that. But, just to touch base on that.
And to make sure the board knows, and we will do, we along with the highway department, that's kind of a new thing. They're going to also inspect with us. So we're going to. I mean, this will be on our inspection routine. And so as we're out east end of the county, our inspectors will be driving by there, looking at the site, making sure they're doing what they should be doing, and taking care of the public infrastructure.
But I guess my point is, what all you said about the road bond, he's aware of all that, and he's agreed to all that. Correct. And my question, you've already answered my question, if what y'all had planned to do about keeping mud off the road, and you already said you're going to have something there, so that's all I had.
Joe?
Couple of questions. Floodplain. Is he allowed to dig in a floodplain like that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Pulling dirt out of the floodplain from a hydraulic standpoint is.
The other question is, when he comes out of there, where the ditch is he supposed to put any type of pipe there with gravel to allow drainage?
There's already an exit there, and he's going to touch up that exit to put typical construction practices are to use like a 3 or 4 inch rock. It's kind of strategically placed so that as they drive through, it leaves holes for that mud to pack in there. And so he'll have to freshen that road up, and they'll have a rock haul road. He said about 150 feet long, so it'll do that. And as far as the erosion goes in the floodplain, I mean, this is something, and Mr. Vaughn, this is something we'll be looking for. As they disturb land, as they get past an area, we expect them to cover it, either put seed on it if it's a time of the year that we can get some seed growing, or to put straw on it, something to cover it to reduce erosion. So, I mean, that's one of our major inspection points.
As far as the erosion goes, we won't have any more area disturbed. There won't be near as much erosion as there would be if you plowed that field up. And I'm sure that field's been plowed several years ago, many times. So, we won't have a large area disturbed, and when we get through with an area, basically probably in the fall, then we'll grade it up and sow it down. As far as the erosion going out, we have, we talked about drainage that day, and we were going to place some rock. We were going to place some rock where the water is going out to catch, to filter that whatever dirt may leave or wouldn't leave if we place the rock there.
I guess for my own question, he said he was going to build in it. Can you build in a floodplain?
No, I'm building across the creek there. The rest of the lot is across the creek, and it is not in the floodplain.
Okay.
In theory, you kind of could, but that's another conversation.
I have spoken with all 4 of the landowners that touch this property and explained to them what I want to do. And in fact, I've got to cross one of them there with an easement. We'll be crossing one of them with dirt. And none of the 4 of them, after I explained to them what I wanted to do, none of the 4 of them had any problem with it.
Okay, thank you. We'll close the public hearing. I'll entertain a motion on it.
Before you entertain, if I could just, there was one comment that one of the people that spoke made, and they were curious to know if a burrow pit also meant they could have a landfill there. And I just wanted to make sure they understood that the quick answer to that is no. Landfill, be it a sanitary landfill or what's called a C&D, construction demolition landfill, are handled completely differently in our zoning ordinance. They have to be zoned for basically industrial type use, and they're also heavily regulated through the state. So that won't be an issue.
Close the public hearing. We'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to be approved.
I second it.
Have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Keith Bratcher,
Yes.
Joe Crowell,
Yes.
Joe Machado,
I'm a devil's advocate. No.
Gary Sartain,
Yes.
Dane Cantrell.
Yes.
Motion carries, sir.
Next item we have is a request by Donald Bruce, and this is also a barrel pit, Rucker Road. What do you have on that, please?
Thank you. Application 2014-3 involves a property located at 2789 Rucker Road. It's a 76-acre tract of land. It's made up of 2 parcels. The applicant's Donald Bruce, and they are seeking a special exception approval that would permit a temporary burrow pit on the property. It will be a 7.6-acre pond, and the applicant did appear before the board last year, and the board felt that more information was needed, and the applicant has reapplied with, it seems to know when I'm making a presentation. Okay. With additional information and revised drawings prepared by an engineer, and they are here to answer any questions. The applicant indicates that the pond will be used as an agricultural pond. However, the soil will be removed from the property. They propose that there will never be more than 10 loads of dirt hauled from the property in one day. Staff finds that the application meets all the criteria for burrow pits that can be demonstrated at this hearing, and that the applicant has met with the county engineer and all the conditions that if he were to receive approval that would apply to the request would, including the provision of a road bond. He is aware of those conditions. We have received one phone call in opposition to the request. We posted a sign on the property, and this is the layout. As you will see, that the pond is located towards the rear of the property. And that concludes our presentation.
Do we have anyone here representing this request? Our top engineer, Bill Huddleston.
Thank you, Chairman Cantrell, members of the board. I am Bill Huddleston, president of Huddleston Steel Engineering here in Murfreesboro. I'm here with Mr. Don Bruce, who's the property owner out there on Rucker Road. He's asking for approval of a borrow pit. We do have a plan that was shown up on the screen. We're looking to dig no more than 7.6 acres, which is no more than 10% of this property. We're looking to dig no more than 10 to 15 feet deep. We will require that we keep 3-to-1 side slopes on this pond. We'll be providing the proper erosion control for the project. We'll be obtaining the necessary state permits. We'll be required to file a notice of intent with the state Department of Environment and Conservation, and also a stormwater pollution prevention plan. And what that does is outline very specifically how we're going to take care of this area as we dig and after we dig this pond. We will prepare a reclamation plan that shows that in the end this will be a fishing pond for recreation and also for watering livestock. This work will be in the floodplain, which is good for 2 reasons. Number one, we have better dirt down there. And number 2, it does provide more capacity for the middle fork of Stones River and therefore helps with flooding. We're a long way from any residences, and we're 1,500 feet from Rucker Road. So with that, we respectfully request that you approve this tonight.
Any questions from Bill?
I don't mean to put you on the spot, Eric, but are you familiar with what they're doing out here? And
I am. And this
Bill,
one,
everything applies.
it's similar to the previous application. It's deeper, and this one is a little farther from a state highway. But other than that, I mean, it's basically a similar request.
And they have a requisition plan, and you're familiar with that, and you're good with everything there.
Yeah, Mr. Huddleston drew up a little plan. It's basically 3-to-1 slopes and presentable.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Any other questions?
I have one. Will you be hauling on Sunday out of there?
No, sir. We will not haul on Sunday.
Tell me how many acres you think the pond will be when it's finished?
No more than 7.6.
Be overseeing this yourself?
I'll be overseeing it as much as Mr. Bruce wants me to, and if Mr. Hill calls me to go look at it out there with him, be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Bill, how long do you think this will be in operation?
Looking right now, 1 to 2 years.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. We'll open this for a public hearing for anyone who'd like to speak on this request. Close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve.
Have a motion to be approved.
I'll second it.
Have a second. Call the roll, please.
Bratcher,
Yes.
Joe Crowell,
Yes.
Joe Machoto,
Yes.
Jerry Sartain,
No.
Dane Cantrell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item we have is a request by Kevin Lee, who is requesting a major home-based business, and this is restoration of automobiles.
Thank you. Application 2014-4 is a request for special exception approval for a major home-based business involving the restoration of cars and on a property located in the residential low-density district. The subject property is located at 10,520 Independent Hill Road, and the site measures 5 acres in area. And the applicant would like to conduct his business in an existing barn that's located on the property. Because the barn measures 2,400 square feet, and that exceeds the 500 square foot maximum in a detached structure for home-based businesses, he is required to appear before the board for special exception approval. Now, the applicant is not proposing any additional employees. He indicates what the hours will be, and indicates also that there will be no outside storage of any of the vehicles that will be restored as part of the business. All storage for those vehicles would be located inside the barn. We have received 2 informational calls on this once we posted the sign. These are pictures of the surrounding area, and we're going to make it to the site here. This is the existing barn that the applicant proposes to locate the business within, and the existing home that's located on the site, and an additional old dilapidated structure that's on the property. And we find that the proposal meets the criteria for major home-based businesses, and that concludes our presentation.
Do we have anyone here representing this request? If you'll come around, please. Kevin, have you operated this business before?
I've worked in restoration and collision industries.
Okay. Any questions?
They did say no outside storage of vehicles. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you. We'll open this for a public hearing for anyone who'd like to speak on this request. Close the public hearing. If we have a motion on.
Move be approved, Mr.
Have a
Chairman.
motion to be approved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Keith Bratcher,
Yes.
Joe Crowell,
Yes.
Joe Machoto,
Yes.
Jerry Sartain, Dane Cantrell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item we have is a request by Aaron Farmington. This is AT&T Wireless Tower, cell tower, and this will be located on Veterans Parkway. And what do you have on that, please?
Application 2014-5 is a request for special exception approval for the establishment of a monopole communications tower that measures 159 feet. Is proposed to be located on the property that's located within the residential medium density zoning district. The location is 724 Veterans Parkway. It is a 26-acre site. It's directly across from the Barfield Crescent Park, which is in the city. Okay. And the applicant has demonstrated meeting all the criteria that can be demonstrated at this time for telecommunications towers. And this is our first application under our new zoning ordinance, which has specific regulations for cell towers. We have received numerous phone calls in opposition of this request. If the site is approved for the erection of a cell tower, the applicant will still have to go through site plan review through the technical review committee and ultimately the planning commission for the site engineering drawings. And it is at that time that very specific regulations will be demonstrated. However, the proposed tower, which is a concern, the height of the tower, the proposed tower is 172 feet to the nearest property line, and the tower is only 159 feet high. So one of those concerns can be addressed by the applicant. These are photos of the surrounding area and the site. We posted a sign on the property. This is the general layout, the overall property boundary in relation to adjacent properties, and the small square in the parcel is the lease area that will be leased by the applicant from the property owner, and that will be where the tower is erected. And this is an elevation of the tower showing that it will provide three additional antenna sites for co-location purposes. And this is just a zoomed-in version of the site plan of that area that they will be leasing and the actual improvements that will be placed on the ground, in addition to the gravel access drive. And that concludes our presentation.
Let me make sure what you said there. It is not within 160 feet of any property line, street, or building.
That is correct.
Thank you. Do we have anyone here representing this request for come around?
Good evening. My name is Aaron Frampton. I'm zoning manager with Jacobs Engineering. I'm here to speak on behalf of AT&T's special exception application for a new monopole tower facility located at 724 Veterans Parkway. I'm also accompanied by site selection professional Steve Kopelman and project manager Kimberly Adams. The purpose of this monopole facility is to allow AT&T to provide its FCC licensed wireless telecommunications service to cover the intersection of Shelbyville Pike and I-24, Veterans Parkway between Shelbyville Pike and New Salem Highway, as well as the surrounding roads and neighborhoods. More specific coverage maps and an affidavit describing these objectives have been provided with the application materials. When AT&T identifies an area in need of better coverage or greater capacity, its preferred solution is to utilize an existing tower or other tall structure in the area before erecting a new tower due to the significant costs involved. Extensive search efforts were conducted to determine if co-location on an existing structure would be possible, and it was determined that there are no structures in the area that can provide sufficient mounting height and support the load of antennas, lines, and other necessary equipment. Therefore, AT&T must then look for a new tower site location, and its preferred locations are commercial, institutional, or industrial properties. However, potential candidates must also exhibit adequate acreage and be available for lease. Unfortunately, there is no property in a limited search area that fits this use profile. AT&T's proposed site location on the property located off of Veterans Parkway was selected because it is a large 26-acre undeveloped tract within the need area that provides ample setbacks and is very heavily wooded, thereby providing exceptional screening from adjacent properties. Upon construction, a monthly maintenance visit, this monopole facility will be built capable of accommodating three additional carriers, as Danielle mentioned, should they wish to co-locate on it in the future. Upon construction, a monthly maintenance visit by a service vehicle will constitute the sum total of traffic generation. The proposed tower will be a single monopole, not a lattice tower, and it will be well below the height that would require lighting, which is 200 feet. And as has been mentioned, this would be 159 feet. This facility will conform to all Rutherford County Code requirements, as well as those of all applicable federal and state regulatory agencies. According to statistics from the FCC in 2011, more than 1/3 of households have no landline at this time, and that number is just increasing. 70% of all 911 calls originate from wireless devices. Wireless and high-speed broadband has many positive benefits for vital institutions like schools, hospitals, police and fire departments, and residents. New and upgraded infrastructure delivers community benefits, including enhanced public safety, access to improved education, health care, and economic development opportunities. Consumers want access to wireless phone and broadband technology, and the absence of broadband can make a community a less attractive location for new investment and development. Therefore, we respectfully request your recommendation of approval. We are available to answer any questions you may have.
I got a
Questions?
question. I got a question. I mean, we've got a lot of folks here that's opposed. And I'm looking at your proposal as to where you're going to put the tower. You're putting it right in those folks' backyard. Is there any reason, if it's all wooded and all that, you can't move it away from them people's backyard?
The issue of where we located, let me just look that up. We're going to be preserving the buffer zone that's along the property line. We've put it at the rear of a storm drainage easement, and we've tried to limit the length of the access road, and that's the reason why it is where it's located.
It still puts it in their backyard. I mean, you see where the
Speak into the mic.
see where the house is. Yeah, it's and you're putting the road right up there next to their house.
I'm going to ask that Steve Kopelman, who's our site selection specialist, see if he can speak to that.
Could you put the arrow where the tower's actually going to be, please, Danielle?
Latitudes, longitudes.
She kind of put it on, she kind of circled it up there. I mean, that's rough, of course, but that general area is what we're looking at.
Answer the location question. And
Could you repeat your name
I'm
before
sorry,
you start speaking?
Stephen Kopelman, Jacobs Engineering. The reason that this particular location was selected on the property was to reduce impact to the surrounding neighborhoods and to still take advantage of the thick forest cover that is there to reduce the visibility from Veterans Parkway. So as you can see, it is only somewhat proximate to one house to the east there, to the right of the red circle. But having been to the property a couple times myself now, that is very thickly wooded, and there's a tree line along the property line, and then the green area, Danielle, I don't know if you can point to it, but the green strip that runs north and south there on the property provided an excellent access area from Veterans Parkway and just opened up just south of where her Danielle's red dot is. So it was chosen specifically to reduce the impact on adjacent residential structures.
Any other questions? Thank you. We'll open this for a public hearing for anyone who'd like to speak on this. If you'll come around, please.
Yes, sir.
like for you to try to remain within the 3-minute time limit and speak specifically to the request. Thank you.
My name is Patrick Robinson. I live behind the proposed site, 1119 Couples Courts, 500 feet from the property, or the pole. And there is a burden of proof to be met by this applicant that there is a significant gap in coverage that actually exists in the proposed location to put a cell tower there. I know people with Verizon, Sprint, AT&T phones, and nobody has a problem with cellular reception issues. The federal law is that you can't deny your cell tower permits that need to fill a significant gap in coverage. We have coverage, so we have a reason to deny this monopole. In fact, AT&T cell phone towers have excellent coverage in our area. If you go on AT&T's website and look at their coverage map for data on the wireless phone, the entire area is in the best zone. The voice coverage in my area is in the best zone. If they say that we're already in the best and good categories on their website, then why should there be another tower in the middle of a residential area across the street from Barfield Crescent Park and less than 2,000 feet from an elementary school? People come to this area to enjoy hiking, views, and take their kids to Little League. This tower is not compatible with this area. If AT&T feels that they need a cell tower in the area, then why don't they go to an area that is more rural? I have an aerial photo of their coverage, and when you go over the Barfield area where their coverage is lacking, which their site calls in the moderate zone, it is located off Jurgen Road. In this location, there is nothing but land and wilderness. I purchased my home 9 months ago, and a big reason I chose this home was how secluded the area feels. My backyard feels like you are in the woods. The neighborhood is a nice area where people take care of their homes and raise their children. It is across the street from a large park and close to the school. If AT&T places a cell tower in this location, it will make the area undesirable and decrease property values, as well as change the atmosphere. Families want to move here, which will affect business from moving into the currently growing and developing area. There are unknown health risks concerning these towers, and I do not want to risk my 3 children under the age of 5 to something that is unknown. If this is approved, my family's health, property values, and welfare will not be protected. I have copies of the coverage maps if you would like to see them. And as well as the buffer zone is not applicable. These trees are less than 50 feet, and that tower is 159 feet. It's going to tower over them. It's 500 feet from my backyard, and my kids play. It's just going to be terrible. And as far as 911, he was talking about 911 coverage. If you don't have coverage and you dial 911, it's going to pick up the closest cell tower that you have in your area. It doesn't matter if you're AT&T, Verizon, Sprint. It's going to jump on whichever one's closest. Thank you for your time and letting me speak.
Next. Next.
My name is Joanne Kavanaugh, and I live at 2965 Cary Lane, about 500 feet where this proposed site is. And when I first got the notice from the Planning Commission, my main concern was, what is this going to do to my property value? But once I started looking into it, my main concern is radiation exposure. I know the FCC has approved safe levels, but there is a lot of research out there now that prove otherwise. And there are a lot of, as you can see, there's a lot of residential around this area. And I have not to this day seen a cell tower placed in the middle of a big neighborhood like this. Most of the cell towers are on commercial lots or in rural areas. 30 years ago, this was a rural area. Today, it's not. There's hundreds of homes around this. And I just hope that you consider all this when you make your decision.
Thank you. Next.
My name's Darrell Johnson. I live at 2836 Lone Oak Drive, Murfreesboro, just about 400 feet from where the proposed site is. Per the American Cancer Society, very few human studies have focused specifically on cellular phone towers and cancer risk in the United States. Cell phone companies and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration assures that cell phone towers don't pose health risks to the public. Some studies support this, but others do not. An Australian study found that children living near TV and FM broadcast towers, which emit similar radiation to cell towers, develop leukemia at 3 times the rate of children living over 7 miles away. Per a German study, cancer rates more than tripled among people living within 400 meters of cell towers. An Israeli study found cancer quadrupled among people living within 350 meters. Cell phone tower studies were conducted in the city of San Francisco and in cities in Austria, Germany, and Israel. All these studies shared similar findings that the cancer rate is twice as much to 120 times as much if you live close to a cell phone tower. While I personally think the effects of cell phone towers are detrimental to my health, I cannot present to you cold, hard facts of my own. Even if I could, I'm not sure you could use that information to make a decision. Forget about me. What about the several hundred students that attend Barfield School only a few hundred yards from the proposed site? Recently in Murfreesboro, there was an alarming issue with electronic signs. One quote was, "We don't want to look like Las Vegas." If a 30-foot tall electronic sign is an eyesore, then a 150-foot tall cell phone tower is a huge permanent black eye. A real estate agent in Heathstone real estate agent in Merrick, New York, said that you can see a buyer's dismays over the site of a cell tower near a home just by their expression, even if they don't say anything. 30 seconds? Okay. Okay, what I believe about cell towers, I believe they're harmful to my health and the value of my property to go down. The Appraisal Institute, the largest global professional membership organization for appraisal, spotlighted this issue of cell towers and the fair market value of a home and educated its members that a cell tower should, in fact, cause a decrease in home value. You know, home value is a big investment, and it's been going down, and it doesn't need to add to my dilemma. I would appreciate your time and your consideration.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Butch Stanford. I live at 2717
Could
Lone
you
Oak Drive.
repeat your name, please?
Butch Stanford, 2717 Lone Oak Drive. I live a little further away than these gentlemen and ladies do. But I would just like to say that if you guys aren't familiar with the property values going down with regards to cell phone towers in neighborhoods or anywhere, to do the due diligence before passing this, a stay, whatever y'all want to do. There are studies that are out there and easily obtainable. I can send this stuff to you relatively easily. But the Appraisal Institute, the largest global professional membership organization for appraisers with 91 chapters throughout the world, spotlighted the issue of cell phone towers, that the fair market value of a home and educated its members that a cell tower should in fact cause a decrease in home value. The definitive work on this subject was done by a Dr. Sandy Bond, who concluded that media attention to potential health hazards of cell phone towers and antennas has spread concerns among the public, resulting in increased resistance to sites near those towers. Percentages decreased mentioned in the study range from 2 to 20% of the percentage moving towards the higher range of the properties in question. I'd just like to say that if we don't want it and we're property owners, the people who are looking to purchase property are not going to want to buy it either if we're not wanting to live there with it. So just the fact that you're diminishing the amount of people who would want to move into the neighborhood would diminish the property value in and of itself. The first gentleman did a much better job at this than I did, obviously with his research. I did not prepare as well as he did with regards to other placements for in better positions for the tower, and also to speak to the coverage. There's absolutely no, if we're in the best zone for what they advertise, there should be no reason to put one where it's at right now.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the staff. Who owns this property? I don't see it's listed.
She's just getting the application, just hold on a second.
Sarah Lan White and
Who?
Sarah White and David White.
I still didn't understand you.
Sarah and David White.
Next.
I'm Dot Smith, and I live at 2805 Lone Oak. And I think that probably the other people covered it as well as, and answered a lot of the questions that I may have had about it, because my main concern was the health part of it. And I would probably say that every one of you here either have children or grandchildren. And do you remember seeing the pictures of the children at St. Jude's? I mean, that really bothers me. And we wear our little pink ribbons, and we try to do what we can to keep away from getting cancer and things, but I don't really want to have it walking in my back door. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
How you doing? My name's George McNeil. I live at 2949 Lone Oak Drive. My wife couldn't make it, so I have a recording of hers. It's less than 3 minutes for her to speak for me.
We don't take electronic.
Oh, really?
Okay, yes, sir. You have to give us your opinion.
Reason why I'm having her speak, because I can't speak that well with my health condition, that's why.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here. We know we'll record that you're opposed. Next.
I'm Alex Robinson. My parents own 719 Hogan Drive, which is just north of this property. When we bought the house, it was like 18, 19 years ago, all the area around it was strictly residential, and we didn't know that there was going to be any chance that there could be a cell phone tower put on this property. It wasn't zoned correctly. That's why we're here. This is a zoning meeting. Putting a cell phone tower right there, you'd be able to see it walking in my back door. I live, I told you where I live. Obviously, that's line of sight. That's within the broadcast range of these cell phone antennas, okay? I don't want that passing through my brain on a daily basis while I'm sleeping, things like that. I know it does provide extra coverage, but we actually are in a pretty good coverage area. There's not a reason to put a cell phone tower there besides just them wanting to. I mean, they might be able to prove economic gain for that, but that would prove economic loss for me and all of my neighbors. I don't know really what else to say. I don't want to take any more of your time. We've been here a long time. Just please don't do it. Thank you.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you own a cell phone?
Do I own a cell phone? Yes, sir.
Put it up next to your head?
I try not to.
But do you think it's more dangerous to you than that tower?
I'm not a doctor. I'm sorry. But they probably are both very dangerous.
You come and tell us you're worried about your health, but you're using a cell phone next to your head. So I'm just trying to make sense of what you're trying to tell me.
Right. I agree. I see that. I'm aware of that, and I try to use speakerphone and the Bluetooth accessories and things like that as often as possible because I'm aware of those health concerns, and I'm equally as scared about that too. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Howdy, Stu Kilgore, 2934 Cary Lane. It's like, yeah, it's on there somewhere. Is anyone here from AT&T? I had to pick somebody up. I just came back. Anyone here from AT&T? No?
Go ahead. Go ahead with your comments.
First of all, I wasn't cool with the letter coming out 5 days before Christmas. You know, it's not like nobody has anything to do around that time. There's family coming in, there's a lot of responsibilities, and sickness. I know I picked up something too. And it's hard enough to get people to come out and, you know, what seems like, you know, to stand up here like a tomato can before a big corporation and get blown away, and then you add the holidays to it too. Would have been nice to have some more time to mobilize. There's nobody here from AT&T. I wanted to ask if there's ever been a situation where they decide we want to put a tower right there, and then some people from the community come out and say, hey, wait a minute, we don't want that, we don't think it's safe, or it's just ugly, it's not what we signed up for. And they say, okay, we'll put it somewhere else. So I don't know if that's ever happened. I'm just not, you know, convinced that that's the only place that it can be. Right down over here, there's like that ridge of hills covered with trees. They're already ruined by radio towers. So, you know, put the cell phone tower up there too. And then my other question was, for AT&T people who aren't here, how close is the cell tower to their house? But I guess we don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Commissioner? Commissioner Farley.
I'm Gary Farley. I'm the county commissioner in this area. I live at 659 Calvary Court, which I'm not close to. I don't live close to this, but I represent the people there. First of all, I've got here before me, I want to present to you all, there's 125 signatures asking for denial that's opposed to this proposed exception of the 159-foot monopole communication tower. I'm going to give you two good reasons to deny this. One, it's a safety issue. They say it's 159 feet, and it's 172 feet from the property line. Is that correct? Okay. When something that tall falls, it's not going to fall at 159 feet. There's going to be some kind of impact, and it's going to move. So it's going to impact this one house right here on Veterans Parkway. That's a good reason to turn it down. It's impacting that one person for safety issues on that. The second one is, like the first gentleman spoke of, the coverage. They got the coverage they need. They don't need any more coverage because they got what they need now. That's the second one. And the third thing I want to say is those trees out there are not 159 feet. It's been said before. They're roughly 50 feet. So you got 109 feet tall powering over this neighborhood, and it's not a good reason to turn it down, being an eyesore, as the two first ones I told you. So I ask you to deny this request on behalf of the people in that area. There's a whole lot more than 125 that's against it. This is just ones they've talked to, and I've had a lot of phone calls myself. Some I returned, some I couldn't, because I couldn't get to all of them. So,
any questions, Commissioner Farley, while he's up here? Close the public hearing. Close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Open this for discussion. Go ahead.
You ready for the motion?
Well, I'd like for us to discuss this just for a little bit. Is there any discussion?
Okay, the discussion I have, I'm familiar with that area out there. They got all kinds of hills, wooded hills, on the opposite side of that road there, behind Barfield Crescent Road, and I think that's the wrong place to have that tower. They've got all kinds of hill range. It crosses the Shelbyville Highway, would be a much better location for that tower and be away from the populated area. And as we say, we do not know what health effects those towers cause us. And I'm prepared to make a motion when you're ready for it.
Pardon?
The applicant would like an opportunity to address some of the...
I heard him. There's a couple of things that I have in mind here. 30 years ago, when we were looking at cell towers, we came up with this idea that cell towers could cause cancer. There's no credible research that even shows that. If people don't want cell towers, all they have to do is do away with their cell phones, and they won't be building them out there. Now, the other side of the coin is, and I do agree, and we do have some strength in this, if there is any possibility of it falling on other property or on streets, that we do have some leverage there. But let me tell you, the legislature, they've almost limited what we can do legally in preventing these cell towers. Now, you can turn them down, and what they're going to do is they're going to go appeal that. We'll have to go to court over it, and we're going to get this overturned. And that's what happens on it. But I'm willing to hang in there with you as long as you understand what's going to happen here.
I understand it. I couldn't go to bed and go tonight. I'll make a motion to deny the request.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor that it be denied. Do we have a second?
Second.
Call a roll, please.
Keith Bratcher,
Yes.
Joe Crowell,
Yes.
Joe Machoto,
Yes.
Gary Sartain,
No.
Dane Cantrell.
No.
Carries, sir.
Motion passed. Next item we have is a request by Aaron Farmington, and this is a request for a cell tower, and this is on Asbury Road.
Thank you. Application 2014-6 is a request for special exception approval for the establishment of a monopole communications tower measuring 145 feet upon a property located in the residential medium density zone. The subject property is located at 2707 Asbury Road, and the site is a 15-acre site. The applicant is proposing to erect the 145-foot tower upon the property. Okay, I apologize. They indicate that the proposed tower location upon the site will be located 159 feet from the nearest property line, and that meets the height setback distance. The applicant, if approved, will have to go through site plan approval, and all that will be a technical review of the site and the proposed improvements. However, the site demonstrates, or the application demonstrates, meeting all of the criteria for telecommunications towers that can be demonstrated at this time. We have received 2 informational calls regarding this particular request, and 1 call in favor. And these are photos of the surrounding area. And we posted a sign upon the property. And this is the site plan showing the general location of the leased area upon the property and the elevation of the tower. And this is the site plan showing the improvements that will take place within that leased area. And that concludes our presentation.
We're ready for you.
This is another monopole facility as to allow AT&T coverage and increased capacity to cover the area of Asbury Road between Highway 1 and 124 to the southeast of Highway 840, as well as the surrounding roads and neighborhoods. More specific coverage maps and affidavit have been provided with these application materials. And in light of the last application, I'd like to point out, since I didn't have time for rebuttal, that extensive studies are done by AT&T before a new site is selected. AT&T doesn't just choose sites at random. They choose them because they've done research and RF to determine where gaps in coverage are, gaps in capacity. We have before and afters showing where there's a need for increased capacity. And just because someone might have good service right now That doesn't, AT&T has projections for the future on what's going to be in demand. As more and more people use more and more devices that rely on wireless, it's not just a matter of coverage anymore, it's a matter of capacity. And being able to deliver that to people is important for the economic development of the area and for the county. I'm sort of doing my rebuttal now. Under federal law, state and local governments may not regulate the placement, construction, and modification of wireless facilities on the basis of environmental effects of RF emissions if the facilities comply with FCC regulations governing RF emissions. Wireless devices and facilities must adhere to radio frequency emission guidelines established and enforced by the Federal Communications Commission. RF emissions from wireless facilities generally are significantly lower than permitted. According to recent studies, RF exposures from base stations range from 0.002% to 2% of the levels of international exposure guidelines. The World Health Organization has conducted a review of all available studies and concluded that there is no convincing scientific evidence that the weak RF signals from base stations and wireless networks cause adverse health effects. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has determined that based on all available evidence, there is no increased health risk due to radio frequency energy. The National Cancer Institute has concluded that despite the rise in cell phone use, brain cancer rates have not increased between 1987 and 2005. The FCC has concluded that there is no scientific evidence to date that proves that wireless phone usage can lead to cancer or a variety of health effects. This monopole facility will be built capable of accommodating 3 additional carriers should they wish to co-locate on it in the future. This facility will conform to all Rutherford County Code requirements as well as those of all applicable federal and state regulatory agencies. We respectfully request your recommendation of approval. We're available to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Joe?
Who's the property owner?
We normally do, the applicant has identified it on the plans here, and they have supplied us with the owner authorization for the request, so.
Does the applicant what now? I'm sorry? Okay.
Yes, we have that information, I just don't have.
Yeah, part of the time, whenever we get, and this is just more of kind of a review, but whenever we get applications for either rezonings or special exceptions, variances, whatnot, typically though, you see them with special exceptions or rezonings. There are times when the property owner is entering into negotiation with someone to buy the property, or in this case, to possibly put a cell tower down. However, the property owner will give the applicant permission, and we have a form to that effect, and that's consistent, and that's common. I mean, most of the applications we see are in that boat.
I do not.
It's Richard Minter. We have the owner authorization, which is required as part of the application submittal for the applicant to file application. Richard Minter?
Richard Minter is his name.
Percy and Richard Minter.
Any other questions? Open this for a public hearing for anyone who'd like to speak on this request. Close the public hearing. We have a motion.
I make a motion to approve this one.
We have a motion to be approved. We have a second. Call the roll, please.
Second. Keith Bratcher,
Yes.
Joe Kroll,
Yes.
Joe Machado,
Yes.
Jerry Sartain,
Yes.
Thane Cantrell,
Yes.
motion carries.
Is approved. Do we have any other business? We are adjourned.